Hey, Aaron.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I just started the live stream. The music is up and playing. Just give me a minute.
No worries.
You're a little quiet. Can you?
That's one.
There you go. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Every program wants a different.
I'm old. I'm hard of hearing. Going blind.
Yeah,
I'm decaying.
we're all slowly decaying, slowly falling apart.
I started decaying at the age of 14. I started losing my hair at 14. Can you believe it?
That's brutal.
And some people think there's a god.
Yeah, just all trading off luck, I suppose.
Okay, I'm gonna capture your soul. Is that alright?
Yeah, good guy,
What state are you in?
Jersey.
Jersey.
Indeed.
One of the first colonial states.
Yes. Everything legal there, I heard.
Okay, why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself? Your likes, dislikes, your passions.
Sure. Yeah, I teach at the undergraduate level, have for about 10 years now. My background is in analytic philosophy, primarily moral, meta ethics applied. I've taught a lot of different courses. I am currently working on a PhD in education with a focus in moral education. Specifically, I'm obsessed with the issue of luck. And how we think about it and how it impacts our thinking about issues like meritocracy. But I also am particularly interested in secular moral work. I work in secular communities, trying to help them feel more comfortable talking about why they can believe in morality even though God doesn't exist, but also helping do work on conspiracism in like skeptical communities. So I'm particularly interested in anti-Semitic conspiracism, internet conspiracism. I was doing a bunch of stuff about James Lindsay for a little while because I felt like he was one of our own who went very, very, very bad.
Oh, you don't like James Lindsay?
No, have you not been keeping up with his work recently?
No, I guess not. What
Yeah.
what has he done recently?
Well, so I mean, for example, we're going to talk about CRT today. James Lindsay's view of CRT, according to his conversation with the white Christian nationalist Michael O'Fallon, who runs his program, was that he believes that CRT is a program, an infiltration program, the tip of the spear from China, trying to weaken Western civilization by forcing us to care about woke trivialities and undercutting our ability to protect ourselves from communist takeover.
Oh, he thinks the Chinese are responsible. Foreign influence.
In a way that is like beyond implausible, right? We can of course all agree that there is all sorts of weird influences in the world, but this is more like a level of conspiracism that I think anyone would want to actually sign on to. People can check out the Decoding the Gurus episode that I did with those folks about him and Michael O'Fallon if they want to know more about that strange world. And he's also one of the guys who promoted the CRT moral panic. So I think it's worth challenging him on that in particular, though he doesn't really do debates. So good luck.
Yeah, people have asked me to define CRT whenever I talk about it, and I don't talk about it very often.
Sure.
And one of the first things I say is that there's many ways to define it, look at it, and so just to say there's one CRT definition or theory is wrong. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a cluster of theories, right? It's not just like, one theory, but it's a group of theories that are sort of focused on, I think, the broadest way to put it would be a group of theories that are focused on explaining and addressing ongoing inequities of various sorts, some arising from historic issues, and it emphasizes a couple of key concepts like race being a social construct, intersectionality, like the intersectional nature of identity, the way that you can have kind of systemic inequality without having individuals explicitly acting openly, racist or bigoted in whatever kind of way. Those kind of things that I think for the most part we all have bought into. And then the debate is sort of about degrees and where we should be teaching these things and how.
Yeah. So is it possible to define it in one sentence?
Yeah, so it's, a set of theories that arose in the 60s and 70s meant to explain why systemic inequality was persisting despite nominally race neutral laws in America.
Okay. And in order for CRT to be a thing, race has to be a thing, right?
Right, right. So you have their explanation of race as a social construct would be, they are attempting to take apart the previous version, which would be the kind of eugenicsy biological account of races that I don't think most anyone, not a lot of people, right? Nick Fuentes for sure, but like most individuals these days are not going to sign on to the biological account of race. You have, of course, your race realists,
So what
but
is race then?
right. So race is the way that people perceive you as being a member of certain groups, or you perceive yourself as being a member of certain groups, and the way that society treats you and you treat other individuals based on those perceptions.
Okay. So can one define, for example, what it means to be white?
Sure. Right. So white is to be perceived as being a member of a white racial or ethnic group, whichever of those terms you want to use. I'm not really fussed about it. But like, for example, you've probably experienced being perceived as a white guy, right?
Yeah. But
Right.
what
So
does
you
that
were
actually
experiencing.
mean without using the word white?
What does it mean for you when you experienced it?
Well, I'm asking you first.
I know, but I would like to have you join in the conversation. So I'm curious. You said that you've had this experience. I thought maybe you could
Well,
share with
people
us
have
what that
just called
experience
me
was like.
white.
And did it convey no connotations beyond that for you?
Not really.
Interesting. So,
So what does
sometimes,
white
for
mean to
example,
you?
well, so I think white generally has been associated with a position of power or dominance. It is so, for example, you have in the history of American laws, you have explicit laws defining whiteness for a period of time based on what your racial lineage was, and then you see these really interesting laws that play out where this one guy comes forward who uh biologically is white, quote unquote, based on the laws of that time, but doesn't look white. And they rule you're not white because a guy on the street wouldn't think that you're white. Whereas another guy comes along and he says, I'm not biologically white. I think Japanese was the guy, but he looks white. He'd pass as white anywhere, anytime. Also gets denied whiteness. And this is during a period where like being white means you get to like have more rights than other people. So they were trying to essentially have all of the rights of everyone in the country at that
Well,
time.
like I would
So,
define
yeah.
white as a skin shade.
Right. And so then you have complicated questions about like what shade and are there individuals who might have that shade, but also like might look like me. And so for some individuals would code as being Jewish and are Jewish people white, complicated that's intersectionality for you, right? You have these complicated questions. So, race isn't merely skin color. Skin color is part of it. But it's more of like I said, a social construct that includes skin color and a bunch of other assumptions
Like
about
power.
individuals, like power, like intelligence for some people, like psychological or
So does white
personality
mean more
dispositions.
power and white mean more intelligence?
No. So what white would generally mean is that individuals have historically had certain kinds of power and so have historically benefited from those things, and so can potentially benefit from things like white privilege in the present, which is I don't love the term privilege. I much prefer the term luck. But if are looking for like concrete examples, right? The classic example is going to be during a period of time. I would say it probably is still the case, but it depends. You can debate that. But if somebody, is more likely to get pulled over because of their skin color, let's say, right? Not an unreasonable hypothetical. that would be a kind of privilege. If one person is less likely to be pulled over, less likely to receive a ticket, hypothetically, that would be a kind of privilege.
Where do you think white privilege comes from?
What do you mean?
How did it start? Where?
Like ontologically,
Yeah,
or like where did the concept come from?
yeah. Where did white privilege come from?
So white privilege arises. So this is this is going to be like a longer conversation, right? But you're going to have a historical series of events around the 1500s where you have this transition from feudal systems towards more imperial colonial systems at that place in time. You're starting to see the beginnings of the modern industrializing, that sort of stuff is all sort of taking place. And the argument kind of goes around that time. The concept of race as we understand it in the modern world was constructed over a long period as a way to justify treating certain individuals as more or less like persons. So you have a lot of scientific work goes into constructing accounts of the different races, a lot of debates about the evolution of the different races. A lot of this is spurred on by sort of colonial exploration, where you start meeting people who are very, very different than you, and you start asking a lot of questions about why, and like, how does this cope with, how does this deal with the fact that the Bible tells us there's just this one lineage? You get a lot of stuff happening then, and it's all tied in with sort of the rise of modern capitalism, the rise of kind of what we would say, quote unquote, Western or European colonial power. And then you have hundreds of years of, that racially justified exploitation, extraction of wealth, consolidating of wealth in what we now think of as, quote unquote, developed countries. And then the individuals in those countries who are predominantly white then benefit from those sorts of things. And so the privilege that they have comes from this history of wealth extraction and consolidation.
But at some point, like that, the history comes from someplace. Maybe it's better to think of a specific example of white privilege. What's the first thing pops in your head?
So the thing I just already explained about the getting stopped by a cop or not.
Okay.
Being more likely to get stopped and frisked, for example.
Okay, so why do you think, let's say, it's a white privilege not to get stopped and frisked as much as other races? Where did that come from?
It comes from the history of white people being coded as less dangerous by police officers as compared to people of color.
Okay, and where did that come from? That idea that white people are
racism in America? I'm I'm not sure what you mean. Like, eventually we're just talking about like an explicitly segregationist and before that slave owning society. So like, I'm not sure what you're confused about the gaps here. I feel like you're looking for gaps that I don't think exist.
Well, one explanation I could think of why, let's say, certain races would have a privilege of not getting stopped is because of the history of crime. So if a certain race commits more crimes than another race, they're more likely to be stopped. That might be an explanation, right?
I see. So your theory would be during the period in New York City when stop and frisk was allowed before it was ruled racially unconstitutional.
No, I'm talking about privilege right now. Like,
I know. I'm giving us a concrete example. So statistically speaking, your argument is the reason that, for example, a bunch of people of color get stopped and frisked during that period as opposed to white people is because the cops are justified in stopping and frisking those people because they're more likely to be criminals. Is that the idea?
Well, that might be one explanation. Like, could that be false?
Right.
Or true, I should say.
Yeah, it's false in a variety of ways.
But could it be
I'm just
true?
trying to make sure I understand your argument. No, I mean, let me say this way. In the sense that, like, the cops think that, yes. In the sense that they are justified.
No, could it be true
no.
that certain races commit more crimes than other races?
Yes, is statistically the case that certain races commit more crimes than other races because that's how statistics works.
Yeah.
Like, literally, there has to be a statistical
do you think
analysis
that's
that says
maybe where that privilege came from?
That doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what you mean. Like,
well, if certain races commit more crimes than other races,
sure,
then this perceptions in a police officer's mind that would cause them to give privilege to the race that doesn't commit more crime. Yeah, that's reasonable. Right?
Yeah. Oh, it's not reasonable, but it is what causes it for sure.
Why is it not reasonable?
Well, because the cop is A, wrong in thinking that this person is less likely to commit a crime, and B, wrong in acting based on that
Can't you
assumption.
use statistics to figure out likeliness?
But if she was actually good at statistics, she would understand how the attempts to appeal to statistics in this way are inaccurate. That, like, it's not the case that a black person walking down the street is vastly more likely than a white person to commit a crime or to be carrying a weapon, and therefore, like,
Okay.
it's better to stop and frisk them. Like, that's statistically inaccurate. It would involve a misunderstanding of the math, essentially.
Misunderstanding of the math. Well,
Yeah,
you could think of scenarios where, let's say, um, 99% of a certain race commits the crime.
sure,
Like, you could take
sure,
an extreme example. Then it would be
sure.
reasonable,
I love
right?
extreme examples. Yeah, if you were in a situation where you had an evil race, let's say, who, like,
Like white
really
people.
just do yeah, like white people. I mean, look, historically, white people did commit disproportionately vastly more of the crimes and continue to do so. If you think about crime as more than just, carrying drugs, and you think about it as, like, vast wealth extraction that harms immense numbers of people. Sure, right. White people did a fuck ton more bad things. Um, if we were to say we should therefore what? Racially profile against white people in all situations? Like, what would your policy recommendation be if we had that situation where it's 99% of crimes are committed by one race of people?
Yeah, I'm not against profiling in general, but I think each person should be judged by their own personhood. So,
How do you reconcile those things? How would you profile in general, but also judge each person in this individual way?
well, there's because of these extreme examples, like for example, like after 9/11,
Sure,
like
it's a
grandma,
great example.
grandma, 95 years old, getting on a plane. Um,
So, are
really?
you on board with, like, Sam Harris's view that we should have, like, explicitly racially profiled Middle Eastern individuals?
Um, During that time, yeah, I think it would be justified.
Even though, like, all of the experts on the subject said that it would do no good whatsoever?
All the experts, you've pulled all of
As
them.
far as far as I know, all reasonable experts said that that was a unjust. I mean, like, if you have a real, like, legitimate expert who actually thinks that racially profiling would have worked and has data, I would love to see it, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist and that you don't have it.
So you're saying it doesn't work, racial profiling,
Right, I'm saying racial profiling does not work. That is
ever?
the result we get. That's the result we've gotten in Stop and Frisk. It's the result we've gotten with Islamic people. It's an inductive claim. So, like, can I say with 100% certainty? Absolutely not. But, like,
Like
does it appear that, like,
what about things like not profiling based on race, but other things like age, the type of car they drive, stuff like that?
in what situation?
Oh, I don't know. Let's say we know statistically that 95% of all drug dealers selling crack to kids or whatever drive Lincoln Town cars. And now we profile based on what people drive. Is that okay?
We should just ban Lincoln Town cars.
Ban
Okay.
Lincoln Town cars. But
I
is it
mean,
okay
yeah.
to profile based on hubcaps on a car or the car itself?
So, like, again, if you have a toy hypothetical where you say hypothetically this thing is a perfect, like, let's imagine all drug dealers drive around with a giant sign on their car that says I'm a drug dealer. Should we stop them and see if they have drugs? I guess that seems like a decent causal inference at that
But
point.
my,
I would say we should decriminalize drugs, but that's a whole separate argument.
but are you against profiling based on the type of car you drive?
Um, Generally against it, yes, because I don't have any reason to think that it helps. Do
Okay.
you have evidence that it works?
Well, I'm just saying, I gave you that hypothetical of 95.
I'm a pragmatist. Like, if you really could show that it works. Now, I'm gonna set a very high bar for it works when it comes to things like racial profiling, for example, because of the history and because of the way that it's been abused. Like, you're gonna have to show me 99% of crime is committed by team evil race over here. Otherwise, I'm gonna be skeptical that this is actually a good idea because it keeps
Is
not
there any
working.
profiling you'd be for? You're against race profiling. How about sounds like you're against car profiling.
I'm not sure what you're asking. I think, like, this is a silly question, don't you think?
Oh, I'm just okay. Let's move on.
What profiling are you for? I mean,
Well, like I give an example of 95-year-old grandma.
sure.
You can profile old people as being less likely to commit certain crimes.
Okay, and is more likely statistically to commit other crimes potentially, and is more likely
Really?
to be at risk for being victims of certain crimes potentially. Sure,
They're just waiting to die.
like
But
that's just statistics, right? I feel like you're just describing statistics at
yeah,
this
yeah, I
point.
am. Let's get on to CRT because we're not really talking about it
Sure.
directly. Um, is CRT the theory falsifiable?
What do you mean by that? Do you mean like can we
That we could
present
something
claims and then test them to some extent?
that we could, yeah, we could see, learn, experience something to say, oh, this theory is wrong.
Yes, I would say so.
What would be an example?
So I would say, for example, you could prove that there is no systemic injustice, theoretically. Right. If you could collect all the data effectively and you can control effectively for all of the factors that are going into things, and you could show that the factors are not the result of some sort of unacceptable, cause, you could reasonably show that like there's no systemic injustice in this particular
Okay,
situation.
so let's say, okay, so if you could show there is zero systemic injustice, what if it was like 0.5% systemic injustice and 99.5% not? Would
Okay.
CRT theory still be a theory?
So I mean, like CRT, the theories itself is just true in the sense that like other basic claims about reality are going to be true. So like systemic injustice as a concept, right? The ability for there to be a system that harms certain individuals because of their race, let's say, even if no one involved is like actively trying to hurt anybody,
But if it's true
right?
just in itself, then it's not falsifiable. Like you're,
Well, hold on. This is like basic conceptual understanding here, right? So when I claim there's such a thing as systemic injustice conceptually, I'm just explaining a concept. When I say it's instantiated in a particular thing in the world,
yeah,
then I'm saying it actually exists, right?
right. But let's say it
Okay.
exists, but it's only,
Whether or not it exists is falsifiable. The concept itself isn't something that would be falsifiable. It's something that would be potentially illogical or incoherent. If you could show there's a logical contradiction with inside the concept, you could show that it's not a good concept. But like concepts themselves are not falsifiable in the sense that you're thinking in a kind of like basic science experimenty kind of
okay,
way.
okay. So no, we're not talking about the concept. We're talking about practical
Right.
usefulness, let's say.
Okay, great. So is CRT practically applicable to our world? Is that the question? And is the claim that it is applicable falsifiable? Is that the idea?
Yeah, and so let's say,
Okay,
let's
then
say,
yes, it's falsifiable.
okay, and but then when I asked you about, what if the systemic whatever racism happens not 0.5% of the time, is it worth still talking about CRT?
That's a different, more complicated question, right? So now you're into a complicated ethical trade-offs question, which is what percent of injustice is there, and what percent of injustice are you willing to accept before you stop talking about it?
Yeah, and would you?
But that's a more complicated question, right? Like that's a lengthy like ethical trade-offs debate where like realistically it's not going to be 0.05, it's going to be like let's say that currently, like during slavery we were at like 90% and right now we're at 30%, but we'd like to be at 3%.
Okay, and when you like most of the time, just in this few minutes we've been talking, you bringing up
Mhm.
slavery and um, but CRT applies to all races other than white, right?
Yes. And CRT has also been applied beyond race. These basic ideas of systemic injustice apply to
But then
LGBTQ
it's not
individuals.
race theory; it's something else. CRT. The R
Right.
stands for
So
race, right? Yeah.
right. So disability crit is the theory as applied to disability studies. Queer crit is going to be your queer critical theory stuff. Um,
So can you use CRT to
mhm.
explain this?
By race and ethnicity. Ah, yes, the classic Asian gambit.
Yeah. What? How does CRT explain that?
How do you think CRT would explain that if you were steel botting it?
I'm
If
not
you
an
weren't
expert in
trying to.
CRT, so
Oh, I see.
you are. So can you use CRT to
I
explain
know,
this?
but I feel bad because I'm doing all the talking, and you're just, I don't want you to feel left out of the
What?
conversation. I'm genuinely curious what you think my answer is going to
Well,
be
why don't
here
you answer
before I
first, and
answer
then
it.
I'll answer second.
because I think you're just going to move on to your next pivot, I think, if rather than
How
actually
does
engaging
how
the
does critical
conversation.
race theory explain that Asians make more money than whites? Are Asians a
Okay.
minority
So how do you
race?
define Asians in this particular study? Do you know?
Uh, People who self-identify as Asian.
Okay. Is that from the study itself?
Well, I could scroll down, but how
I just
does
want to make sure before we're citing a resource that you actually know what the resource
let's
says. You're
assume I know
asking me.
nothing, okay?
Okay.
I'm asking
So,
questions.
so here's what CRT is going to say is, well, first of all, what do you mean by Asian? And they're going to highlight, and this is someone like, for example, Matsuda is an Asian critical race theorist who talks about these issues, and so they'll highlight that Asian is an extremely broad term, right? And it encompasses a large group of individuals, and that if you actually break down the income levels within them, you're going to see a vast range between individuals who are doing better than the median and a lot of individuals who are doing less well than the median. So,
Yeah, but the median's still a median. So how do you explain that we have
yeah.
a
So, mhm,
non-white
yeah. And
people
so then
of
what they're going to talk
color
about is things
making more
like
money
immigration.
than
Yeah.
white? How does
Right. So then
CRT
they're going to
explain
explain.
this?
I'm trying to answer your question, buddy.
Okay.
I don't think you're necessarily actually interested in the answer, but I will share it for folks who are.
Why do you say that? Hang
Um,
on. Why do you say I'm not interested in the answer?
because I think you're running a script rather than having a conversation.
I have not prepared for this at all. This is an
Okay.
impromptu.
That's fine. I think that this is a particular set of scripts. We can play out this line of argument. It's fine. So what they're going to
I'm
say
not meaning
is,
to make you defensive or
yeah,
anything. Just
no, it's
as a
okay.
theory, as an
Yeah.
academic theory, how does
Oh,
critical
no,
race
I'm
theory
not
explain
defensive at
this?
all. I just want to highlight that, like, we can walk through these steps, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily going to help with understanding. But let me explain. So what they're going to say is Asian is a very broad category. Let's break it down by like things like coming from China versus coming from Japan versus coming from a bunch of other countries, right? So we start there. And then we're going to notice that certain groups are doing significantly better than others. And what are we going to notice about those groups? We're going to notice that those groups are coming from countries that are more affluent themselves, that those individuals are likely immigrating here on better visas because they are viewed as being higher skilled workers. And so they are making more when they are brought over, whereas other individuals in these groups are going to be doing worse off because they are being brought in often as low skilled workers, or they are coming over potentially illegally. They are dealing with a variety of issues like anybody in any other group in this kind of way. So what you're going to see is a lot of, a higher than we would expect sort of number of high income earners who are sort of cherry picked high skilled workers from other countries, but also a lot of individuals who are not necessarily doing as well off. And so they're going to explain that in that kind of way, basically. So, like, the white people that are here in America is just the white people that are mostly born here in America, which is a mix of like people, it's like a mix, right? Whereas the immigrants who are coming over, a lot of them are being cherry picked because we want these particular kinds of high skilled workers. So they're going to end up in places like Silicon Valley, for example, doing a bunch of coding. Those are the kind of explanations they're going to
Okay, can I
give.
repeat back?
So let me ask you a question now. That's a kind of, socially constructed, complicated answer, right? Another answer would be Asians are smarter than white people, right? Like, biological answer, right? The biological answer would be Asians make more than white people because they are better than white people in some way. I think those are the two options for explaining that number, and I'm curious which one you prefer.
Well, no, I don't think either of them is correct.
Oh, so what do you think is correct?
I think one thing that could explain this, not saying that it
Okay.
necessarily does, but one thing that explain this is maybe Asians work harder.
So the hard work theory.
Yeah, do you disagree?
I do. Do you have evidence that Asians work harder than other cultures, like black cultures?
Why do you say black cultures? Why do you go there right away?
Because statistically in this argument, it's usually a conversation about how black people are worse off than white people, but Asians are better off than white people. And that's because Asians have good culture and black people don't. That's just the conversation people have over and over again about this particular piece of
Okay, how would
information,
we figure out if
which I
that's
guess you're
true or
not
not?
familiar with. Well, we would look at the statistics. We would look
Yeah,
at,
like this.
Right. We would look at other statistics. We would look at more than just one data point, right? You don't look at one data point, right, and come to a conclusion, do you?
Uh, well, on the data point of household income, yeah, I think this one data point's good.
Sure. And do you think that one data point is sufficient to conclude that this is entirely based on culture related
Entirely?
to
No.
work ethic? Okay, well, good. So you think we need more data points?
Sure, sure.
Great. Okay, that's all I was saying. So
Okay.
I'm glad we agree.
So,
So the
but
data,
I want to
yeah,
summarize what you said earlier. You
sure.
said, I asked you, how does critical race theory explain that Asians, people of color, make more money, median household income compared to, let's say, white and other races? And you said, because if you look at the data more closely, some of them might be coming from more affluent countries with higher skill sets, and that could explain it. Did I hear you right?
Yeah, that would be one of many possible explanations. It seems more plausible to me than like Asians are racially better or culturally better.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, no, except for the culturally. Like culturally could explain it as well, right?
It could. I just don't think that the evidence actually bears that out if you look at more data points.
And that evidence of culture, what have you seen that would make you say that the culture is not better, or not a
Well,
not or not a
what do you think
factor,
that
I
you would
should
look
say?
to?
Like, what evidence have you seen that culture might not be an explanation here?
Yeah, and I'm curious, like statistically speaking, like what do you imagine people would look to? There's lots of research on this. I'm just curious what you think would be like the useful piece of information that I could
I don't
bring
know,
up that
years
would
of
convince you.
education in school, maybe.
Okay. So what about things like a strong work ethic generally has positive implications and is generally transferred across cultures or across generations?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you would find plenty of that amongst the if you scroll down on your median income, if you include more of the races, the ones under white, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna look at, what's down there at the bottom? Black, right.
Yeah.
Perfect. As expected.
As
Um,
expected.
yeah, because this is again, I've seen this exact image that you're showing me
Why is
before.
that
Uh,
expected?
because again, this is the conversation over and over and over and over again. I'm trying to catch you up on it. So here's what's going to happen, right? I'm going to say, look, there's a bunch of evidence that in Black culture, there is a really hard work ethic. There's a great book called Fugitive Education, which is about Blacks continuing to try to educate themselves despite the history of segregation and like racial prevention of education in our society. That there's tons of evidence that there's a really strong work ethic within Black culture, that it is not fundamentally different than the Asian culture at the top of that list in terms of its level of concern with education and work ethics. And then we're going to ask, well, what's the other explanation? Well, the other explanation is going to be Blacks as a group in particular, because of the history of slavery and segregation and racism in our country, have been systematically mistreated in a bunch of ways and are continuing to suffer
Do you
from the
think other
harms
people
caused
of
by that.
color have been systematically mistreated in that?
Absolutely,
Asians?
to varying degrees, but not to the same degree.
Okay, so
That's just
Asians
that's just
have
the
been
right that's just the answer.
systematically oppressed,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they still make more money than whites.
Yes. No, the median is the same. Like the median is higher.
Right. The
But yeah,
median is
like
higher.
okay, so let's look at the
So
wealth. What's the
systematically
wealth?
oppressed people of
Well,
color
hold on. No,
are
like we're talking about median income versus like how much wealth actually is there amongst white people versus Asian individuals in America, for example.
like as a total, or you mean
Yeah.
per person?
Do you have those numbers?
Well, there's far fewer Asians in America than whites. So if you're going just
Okay.
cumulatively, then yeah, of course.
Right. So you're going to, I think, still see a large amount of wealth consolidation amongst white
That's
individuals.
because there's more whites than Asians.
Yes.
Right. That's just science.
Right. I'm just saying you should understand that like there's still a large amount of wealth consolidated in a small number of predominantly white
So on this one
individuals
metric,
in developed countries.
on this
Yeah.
one metric of household income,
Right. On this one single metric of household
yeah,
income,
has
where
oppression
Asian is a
has,
very broad category. Yeah.
has the oppression hurt Asians on household income?
I don't know because I can't see the counter. Like, let me put it this way. Yes, we know because a variety of them are experiencing various situations of racism that reduces their income.
Like not being allowed into Harvard? That sort of thing you're talking about, or something else?
Like, so for example, there are Asian individuals who are currently filing lawsuits, right? As you would point out, that
Yep.
like they are being systematically mistreated because they are Asian and trying to get into schools.
So you're against that?
Am I against people being systematically mistreated? Yes.
Are you against Asians being not allowed into Harvard because they're Asian?
Am I? Yes. I'm against Harvard, broadly speaking. So like that's a larger conversation, right? Like I'm against the elite,
So,
the focus on
so
elite institutions and the harms it
here's a
causes.
point of agreement. I'm against that too. So if Asians are stopped from going into Harvard simply for being Asian, and in lieu an African American gets in, you're against that.
So that's a more complicated ethical question, right?
Well, if there's only a certain number of people who are allowed into Harvard, right?
Right.
So
So
if
we have a prima facie or pro tanto obligation, right, to not do not take race into account. But there may be certain situations where we're ethically justified
hang
in
on, what did
taking
you
race
just
into
say?
account, right?
I
Which part?
what you
Pro
just
tanto?
said. Last 30
So we
seconds.
all have we have an obligation, all other things being equal,
Mm-hmm.
not to take race into account, right?
Not take race into account.
Right. Ideally, our educational system would at no point take into account the race of the student involved,
We have
right?
an obligation not to take race into account. Doesn't that destroy critical race theory?
You're missing the part of the all things being equal part, right? So I'm saying in an ideal world, we would not take this into account. And yes, in an ideal world, we would not need critical race theory as applied. The
Are we
principles would still be
striving for an
true.
ideal world here?
Yes. And the goal of critical race theory is a world in which we no longer need to apply these things. That's the whole idea. But you have to get there by getting from the world we actually exist in. So you have
Ah,
to take into account the complex
so
ethical
for now
questions
we
of
have to take race into account, but maybe later we don't. That's what
right.
you're
And I
saying.
don't think that's unreasonable. Yeah.
Okay. So, but you're still against Asians not getting into Harvard simply because they're Asian.
Pro tanto.
What does that
All
mean?
things being equal.
All things
All
being
things
equal.
being equal, right? So it's like saying, look,
But
I'm
things are
for
not all
liberty.
equal right now. So,
Right, right. I'm for freedom, right? I'm for personal liberty. I'm also for justice, right? And so when there is a conflict between freedom or personal liberty and justice, I have to make complex ethical trade-offs, right?
are you for personal responsibility as well?
What do you mean by personal responsibility? That's
Uh,
a very complicated question.
well, you threw out personal liberty,
Hmm.
personal rights, personal
All good.
responsibilities. They all kind of go hand in hand. Like they're kind of maybe the opposite sides of a coin.
Yeah. So for folks who aren't familiar with my work, the reason I'm being cagey here is because I don't believe in free will. I don't believe in moral responsibility. I don't believe in just desserts. I do believe in moral truths. I'm a moral realist, and I believe in moral obligations. But I believe whether or not you are good or bad is ultimately the result of luck, and that nobody deserves to suffer.
Do people deserve? Okay, nobody deserves to suffer. Do you believe
Hmm.
that some people deserve rewards?
No.
Okay, so you're consistent at that point.
Yeah.
So basic,
Nobody deserves. There's no such thing as deserving.
nobody deserves. That's very interesting.
And like we could, there's a question of do you as a sentient being with the capacity to flourish deserve to flourish? I'm sympathetic to it, but I think at the end of the day, I think we're better off just saying it would be better if you did, and we're obligated to help you flourish. But no one deserves anything, but especially nobody deserves to suffer.
Part of me appreciates that sentiment because I tend to lean towards responsibilities over rights. So I kind of like that. But on the other hand, like I'm imagining two twins, and they're going to school and learning. You're for education, right?
I do it every day.
Are you for grades?
No,
You're against grades.
sure are. They're deeply immoral.
Are you for ribbons and merit?
No,
Like,
I mean, look,
are you
like
for saying good job?
I'm for saying that went really well. You're lucky that it went really well, and I enjoyed that you did that well. Things like that.
So when
So
someone works
yeah,
really hard
right.
and people like what they've done,
Hmm.
you would say you shouldn't say good job, you did worked hard, well done. You're against that?
Yes, generally speaking. Are you familiar with like the debate between like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation?
No.
Okay. So intrinsic motivation would be doing the thing because you value the thing as the end in itself, right? So what's something you love doing purely for the sake of doing it,
Okay.
right? I'm just curious if you have anything like that,
Yeah, I think so.
right? So that's the ideal, the gold standard of motivation, if you will, right? And then you have extrinsic motivations, which is going to be doing a thing as a means to an end, right? So I get the grade because I don't care about grades, but I want to move on to the next thing or jump through the next hoop or whatever, right? To eventually get to the thing I intrinsically value in theory. And most of our unhappiness in life is that we're stuck doing the extrinsic things because we never get to the intrinsic thing.
But the
The
intrinsic thing
goal
is in our DNA.
different for each person.
Yeah, and it's in our DNA, right?
Uh, that's a really complicated like genes express themselves epiphenomenally with your environment. So what you value is a mix of your experiences combined with your personality or character.
Okay.
So we
I'm
can
still
habituate you to value all sorts of things. Yeah, I'm just trying to help you understand where I'm coming from here. So we motivate people. I think we should motivate people towards intrinsic motivators, right? Help you find the thing that you really do value doing and do
but does
that
it
thing.
work?
It works better than extrinsic motivators, but it's not a great system if you want to be a capitalist empire, is the short answer to
Like
that
I view
question.
us as animals. I think
Okay. What kind of animals?
we're highly evolved primates, and
Hmm.
and if we get zapped by an electrode for doing something, we're not going to do it again, right? That's an extrinsic motivator.
Sure.
Do you agree with that?
That's the way that we work. It's one of the
No,
ways
that
that we
it's
work.
effective.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
To a degree for certain
and
things.
the reverse is
Obviously, like
true.
behaviorism has its limits.
And the reverse is true that if I do something well and I get a treat, like we're basically like dogs except more advanced.
Well, less advanced, but that's another argument.
Okay, in some cases I agree with you, but so this whole idea of you said you're against rewards and punishments, maybe. Let me ask you: are you against rewards and punishments?
In the sense that you deserve them, yes.
Okay.
Now, am I for treat yourself? Yes, I'm big on treat yourself, right? Like have some fun, like enjoy your life, take pleasure in things, and like you have a moral obligation to not do that to excess. You have a moral obligation to help others to also flourish in their own lives, and we help you learn that
Well, wait a
by
minute.
yoking your pleasure sensors, your
But
pleasure, the pleasurable parts of your.
helping
Mhm.
others is this intrinsic motivator.
No, helping others can be intrinsically motivated or
No, no, no.
extrinsically
To them
motivated.
though, like why help other people if you're saying that they themselves shouldn't.
Oh, that's a moral argument, not a motivational argument.
No, no, but if I help
Mm.
someone and they say, "Well, thank you. Like this is motivating me to go forwards in something. You encouraged me. Thank you." You're saying, "Well, they should kind of disregard that and just want to do it internally." Right? Did I hear you right?
No, they can say, "I, appreciate the help and I will pay it forward." Right? Like it's the disconnecting between this is a good thing and you are praiseworthy because you did the thing. Here's a classic example of this because you like the idea that we're animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a tribal behavior that I find really fascinating, where you have a tribal community that does hunter-gatherer style, and they bring back these big hunts. They bring back an animal that they've killed or something. What would you expect they would do to the person who successfully killed the animal?
Praise them.
Right. That's the standard default behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what they find in some cultures, interestingly, is they do the opposite. They neg them. They make fun of the person who got the successful hunt. They hand over the meat to some old guy or something to divide up the meat or something like that. And they make fun of them for how little they belittle their game in this kind of way. Why? Why would they do that?
Maybe reverse psychology to motivate them more.
Okay, maybe to motivate them more. That could be one theory. What else do you think?
If only I could get a bigger game, then they'll love me. That type of thing.
Could be a little bit of reverse psychology there. The theory that some folks put forward that I think I'm most sympathetic to is it's a way to prevent the inevitable aggregation of power around the individual who's lucky. So let's assume that one person is born twice as big, twice as strong, natural hunter, whatever, right? How do you prevent that person from becoming a king?
You push them down.
You humble them, right? You help them understand that it was luck. Yeah, and so the question is there a way to do that in a way that isn't harmful to that individual by helping them remember, so Caesar is very famous, thou art mortal, right? Remember thou art mortal. This idea that like it's valuable rather than like taking someone like Elon Musk and telling them they're the greatest, or taking poor sweet Jesus and telling him that he's a once in a generation voice, right? Look what that does to people. It breaks them, it destroys them, right? So my approach would be to say, that went really well. You helped a lot of people, and it's great that you were lucky enough to be able to do that. And aren't you happy? Don't you enjoy the pleasure? And because we're pro-social creatures, I asked what kind of animals we are. I think we're animals that it's very easy for our pleasure to be yoked to doing the right thing. And so with a little bit of reinforcement and some, remember, thou art mortal, you can pump out individuals who are quite moral without needing them to be egoic about it or, demanding external praise and blame. And then in situations where they won't get that praise or blame, they'll still do the right thing, hopefully. Not always, but more likely than if you've only trained them on pellets, on food pellets.
Yeah, you said you're getting your dissertation on the topic of luck?
Yep.
So you would say then that the reason why certain people are successful is because of luck?
I would say the reason everyone is successful is because of
luck. How about...
And the reason everyone is unsuccessful is also because of luck. I believe that everything is luck all the way down is the answer to what you might be working towards here. Really, all things are luck.
So really tying this into critical race theory, it's still all luck-based.
Everything is luck all the way down.
So if... Okay. I mean...
Do you disagree?
Well, even if it's true, this might be one of these truths that we don't want to propagate.
Yeah, and I'm against noble lie approach, which is a common objection to my position, that we should just lie about this to children because we don't want to, tell them the truth, because then something bad will happen. But you're an ex-Christian, right?
Yeah.
So you would certainly not take any evidence that like Christians are slightly better than atheists as like a reason to lie to them about God, right?
A reason to lie to them about God.
Yeah, it's the exact same argument in both cases, and they actually go together because belief in free will is associated with religious belief.
I'm just thinking like there's people like, I have kids.
Sure.
Do you have kids?
I have hundreds of them every class, every semester.
Okay. And do you think...
I have a sweet puppy. You can see him in the background there.
Do you think some kids work harder than other kids in your class?
Yes.
And that's just based on luck?
Yes.
And you don't give them grades?
I am unfortunately required to give them grades.
On what basis do you give them grades if it's all luck? How do you live with yourself?
I cope with it by, for example, accepting late assignments for full credit at any point and encouraging them to get their things in, and trying my best to give all of them A's, and et cetera, like making it as...
So if someone gets their work,
just as I can.
If someone gets their work done on time and someone hands it in late, you just give them the same grade?
Absolutely.
What motivation would there be for the person who gets their work on time to get it in on time then?
So that they don't get their work backed up and end up having to do a ton of work at the end of the semester just to barely, get through the class.
Well, what if they just don't...
I still grade them on the quality of the work to some extent. Like if they're missing large chunks of the assignment, I have to grade them down. I don't want to. I don't like grading. I think it's
Like, what if
deeply
they
immoral.
chose not to even hand anything in? That's just still based on
And then they
luck,
get a
right?
then they get a 0, unfortunately. There are limits about what I can do in my position of power, in limited power in an unjust society. I'm for the radical overhauling of this system, but I can only do so much from the position I'm in at the moment, which includes things like not grading based on, oh, you had a life crisis in the middle of the semester and didn't get this assignment done.
But you don't think it's better to actually give grades to people, better grades to people who get their work in on time versus those who don't? You don't think that's better?
No, generally not.
Do results matter to you?
Yes, to some extent, depending on what you
But
mean
you're
by
against
results.
rewarding results.
No, I'm for developing intrinsic rewards for results. We already talked about that.
But even developing intrinsic is just a whether people develop it or not is a matter of luck.
Correct. So I'm also for taking care of the people who have the bad luck of not learning all of these skills or habits or whatever that goes into working hard.
Well,
What do you think that
you
working
think you
hard
can
is?
change them?
Do I think we can change people? Yes. Humans are very malleable.
But then that's not luck.
No, that's still luck. Should I go back and define luck? Would that help you?
Yeah. Define luck for me.
Sure. So there are a couple of different ways you could potentially define luck. The two most important ones are chance and lack of control, right? So chance is going to be probabilistic accounts of luck, which is a kind of luck, but it's not all kinds of luck. What I think is the right definition of luck, the best, most useful definition, is going to be a lack of control account, which is to say something is luck when it is beyond your control in a way that we can't hold you responsible for it, usually morally responsible for it. So a classic example would be a random number generator, right? If you have a random number generator, it is a chance kind of luck, but it's also a control kind of luck, right? You can't control it, and so we wouldn't hold you responsible for the outcomes of that random number generator. That would be weird. Follow me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think that everything is the kind of luck on which you can't have moral responsibility. Everything you do, all of your beliefs, all of your actions are beyond your control in the way necessary for moral responsibility, which is different from one kind of control that we talk about. I lift up my glass. That's a kind of control, but it's not a kind of control that's enough to hang moral responsibility on. We need something more than that. And what we need is control over our character, our constitution, in a way that we don't actually have because of the basic nature of the universe and the way time and
So you're against
determinism and
moral
causality work.
responsibility because of this concept of luck.
Mhm.
So are the oppression of white people in the United States, should they be held morally responsible?
The oppression of white people.
The
You mean the
oppression
oppression by white
yeah,
people?
sorry.
Sorry, I just didn't know if you were going full mask off white, pro-white or something. Yeah, so no, not in the sense of moral responsibility, no. And this is actually a criticism that I've talked about. I think I talked about it on Nathan's show as well. One of my major concerns with quote unquote wokeness is when it gets into a very punitive, retributive kind of place where it thinks that like we need to punish white people because they deserve to be punished after hundreds of years of exploitation and wealth extraction. There's a really interesting study that I include when I talk about luck, especially with conservatives, that finds if you do white privilege education poorly, you will take nice white liberals who care deeply about poor people and turn them into conservatives with regard to poor white people, which is to say they will care less about them because they'll think they deserve to be poor. The reason is they will attribute their failures to their own bad character rather than the bad luck of being born black, for example, in America. I think that's a bad thing. And that's like a bad psychological outcome. You don't want that. So you need to teach about the history of injustice and privilege and all these kinds of things in a way where you make clear that like it's not about now white people deserve to suffer. It's about nobody deserves to suffer. So let's stop with all this unnecessary suffering being caused by these unjust systems.
Nobody deserves to suffer. But
Not even Hitler.
and nobody deserves to be comfortable either, right?
Nobody deserves anything, but you have a moral obligation to help people.
Why?
Moral truth.
Where's that come from?
It's just part of the nature of the universe. I'm a non-natural moral realist, which is to say, I just think it's a fact of the matter that all things being equal, you ought to reduce unnecessary suffering. Once you understand the concept of suffering, you understand that it is the kind of thing with which you ought to reduce the amount of as much as you can, in this world.
You're a weird guy.
100%. That's of all the things you said, that's the one I most agree with.
Okay. Well, we kind of went all over the place, didn't we?
We did.
We got a lot. We talked about a lot of things.
Can I ask you if you're at all sympathetic to any of the things that have been said here?
Oh yeah, I admitted some things I was sympathetic about. I forget what they were, but I do think that even if we're deterministic, we're not omniscient. So there's pushes and pulls in society that I think work. Would you
like what? Well, I'm sorry. You're thinking. Can you give me a specific example that you sound like you have something in mind?
Well, like if my kids slough off with their chores or with their homework, there should be consequences, and that can motivate them not to do it the next time, and vice versa with rewards. I think there's
What kind of consequences?
Oh, I put them in a cave.
I mean, like genuinely, do you spank your children?
No,
Why not?
it's not in my nature.
I mean, as recently as my parents' generation, that was considered very conventional, a normal way to train your children, right?
So you're against spanking because
as far as I understand, it's psychologically harmful and doesn't actually produce the benefits people claim it does.
it's just a matter of luck anyhow, right? Like what damage can it do?
I think so let's go back again, right? Moral claims, true. Moral responsibility, not real. Does that make sense? Right? Take an example of a child with a gun, right? A small child gets a hold of a gun, shoots another small child, doesn't know what a gun is, kills the child, right? Did they do something immoral?
No.
Really? They killed someone. They killed a child.
Yeah.
So they did something bad, consequentially deeply immoral.
Yeah,
right?
they did something bad, but they weren't aware of what they were doing.
So is it immoral in that situation?
No, I said.
Okay, so if I'm Ted Bundy and I'm a serial killer, right? And I don't understand morality, genuinely don't understand it, just like that kid didn't.
Yeah, they did something bad. Same, I'm consistent. Yeah.
Oh, so you think the serial killer didn't do something immoral when they eat a bunch of people?
If they, let's say the one that Sam Harris gives is like the tumor in the brain, right?
Sure, tumor in the brain, classic one.
So there's
the pedophile with the tumor in the brain.
So there's this idea of immorality and still being accountable, locking people up. So yeah, some of them are very tough.
Even separate from legality. I mean, look, it's just a fact of the matter. If I torture someone, if I sexually assault a child, I'm doing something immoral, full stop, right? It's an immoral action, whatever the intentions are, separate from questions of intentions. Right?
The question is one of accountability versus the action.
Right. So what I'm trying to do is help you tease apart what I think is a very easy thing to tease apart, but for some people intuitively they don't think are separate things, is my assessment of whether you did something immoral and my assessment of whether you're morally responsible for that.
That's a good distinction, and I agree with that distinction.
And they come apart in certain situations, right?
Yeah. But I would say
all I'm claiming is they come apart in literally every situation. In all situations, whether you did something good or bad is a claim that we can assess and is true or false. Whether you are morally responsible is always false. You are never morally responsible.
But one could also say that whether someone is morally responsible or not is irrelevant. It's like, what are we going to do about it? Like the practical.
But it is relevant to what we're going to do about it, right?
Yes. And so
think of our criminal justice system, right? What kind of criminal justice system do you have is dependent on whether you think people are actually morally responsible or not.
Well, not always. Like, let's say the person with the tumor,
right?
Could say they're not morally responsible, but we still lock them up until we can fix. Until we can fix the tumor. Let's say you can't fix it. Yeah.
So once we fix the tumor and their desires go away, does it make sense to still imprison that person?
I would lean no.
Okay.
But you would have to.
I agree with
you. Would have to be.
But that's because you've adopted my luck view now.
You have to be certain that that was the one and only cause, right?
But notice that you've now adopted the pro-luck position, right? The anti-luck position would be they still deserve to wait out their
Well,
sentence because they did the bad thing, even if it was a
well,
result of the,
but
tumor.
what if he got a tumor because he ingested something that was carcinogenic or something? I don't know.
So you think like he could somehow deserve because he gave himself a tumor?
Well, no, I'm just saying that he wouldn't be entirely absolved of any responsibility. Like
Right, but I'm
smokers,
guessing. Are,
like
are you are you are you are you pro-choice?
pro-choice. Yes, but I'm pretty much middle of the road, like 12 to 20
Okay,
weeks.
I think we can agree when people have sex, there's a little bit of their own choice, right? Within my limited definition of free will involved, right?
Yeah,
They do the thing,
yeah.
but I don't think you'd want to say that like someone deserves to have to be forced to carry a child to term because they were partly responsible for the conception of that child. So if someone smokes a bunch of cigarettes and gets cancer,
Yeah,
you don't want them to die on the street, right? You still want them to get treated for it, right?
you're right.
So my point is, my view is, I think, more ethically consistent because I think the reality is, if you grew up where I did, you were more likely to smoke. I smoked for years. I quit smoking, but a lot of people didn't because it's luck. And the people who end up sick deserve help, just like the people who did other different things. And that's
Well,
why
you
we
used to
have,
be a
a
smoker.
social safety net. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to smoke cigarettes.
Was it hard to quit?
Yes.
How did you keep striving to quit? What was your trick?
Um, I switched to smoking better things. Plus, I, was with a partner who really didn't like it, and their dislike of it was enough to motivate me,
Do you think other people can quit smoking like you did?
if they're lucky.
If they're lucky. Okay.
So going back to CRT though, right?
Yeah, that's
Can
what
you
we're.
understand? Right, if we take out all of the punitive stuff, it's not about punishing white people. It's just about, look, here's the history of redlining. Let's deal with our housing situation living in the shadow of the history of
Is redlining
redlining,
still a thing in the United States?
in the sense that it's still impacting people, in the sense that people still alive moved into their houses during the time of redlining. Yes.
But can you think of any?
Legally, is it no longer legal?
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
Is it still occurring in various
Can you
ways
name
as a result
a?
of systemic injustice? Yes.
Can you name a racist law in the books of the United States today?
That's so silly. Can
Why is
I
that
name a
silly?
racist law? I think so. We repealed the crack cocaine one. I'm sure there are still other ones out there in particular, like in small places. But I think your question is, are we nominally under the law a race neutral society? Is that your question?
No, my question is name a law on the books
That
today
currently exists
that yeah, that
that is a racist?
yeah.
I'm not sure I know of one that currently exists that explicitly calls out race. You have the classic examples of things like
So you don't know of any.
banning. Well, so there's a debate, for example, about the banning of animal sacrifice, okay, or animal slaughter. There's a debate about whether we should ban, the slaughter of chickens in Brooklyn, for example, which is a big issue for Hasidic culture during certain times of the year where they have this giant slaughtering of chickens. Um, I think that we should limit that kind of behavior to some extent, but they will certainly argue that that would be a racist law. So I think you have debates about laws like that. You have debates about the practicing of
But if
certain
critical
kinds of
race
religious-based culture.
if critical race
Yeah,
theory is about some type of, and correct me if I'm wrong, some type of
yeah,
systemic uh, governmental
right,
type pressure,
right.
and the best you can do for examples of that is not killing chickens.
So you're confused in that you think that so here's the thing. Critical race theory is about explaining, once you have the civil rights amendments, right? Once you have nominally race neutral laws, why do you not see a closing of things like racial income gaps between blacks and whites? So it's not there's secretly still racist laws on the books. Some of it is like pointing out that like actually this law that is nominally race neutral. Sorry, let me actually give you a really obvious example.
Wait, hang on.
Education, or sorry, voting. Voting is the obvious example, right? There's a bunch of voting rights laws or voting limitation laws on the books right now that are very racist, deeply racist. So there you go.
Like, be more specific.
Like, you know, things that are limiting who can vote where and when, the ability, you know, like voter ID laws. These are, while not explicitly race, are absolutely intended in racial ways.
Okay,
In ways that are
I'm not a
provable,
U.S. citizen.
like very provable, like falsifiable and provable.
I'm
in
not a
all the
U.S.
ways that you want.
citizen yet.
Oh, okay.
Do you think I should be allowed to vote in the United States? I live here
How long have you lived here for?
20 years.
Yes, you should absolutely be allowed to vote in the United States. That's ridiculous. You live here. Are you planning to continue living here?
Yeah.
Does it matter to you how things go in America?
Yeah.
Then you should absolutely be allowed to vote. This is a stupid question. I'm for open borders. Like, come on. Like, borders are literally luck dams. It's like, let's consolidate all the luck in this one space and then pretend that the fact that you were born here means anything.
So you think the U.S. Constitution is wrong?
Do I think the U.S. Constitution has like various moral flaws that need to be corrected? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The document that says that we're going to count certain people as 2/3 of a person has some gaps in it, morally speaking.
But the thing is, I could have become a citizen a long time ago, and I just, partly due to life and laziness maybe, or luck, I haven't. So
right. Do you want to vote?
Yeah. And I will.
Okay.
And I will. And I'm taking my test for citizenship soon. And
great.
But the thing is, if a country makes a law or a rule saying that you have to be a citizen of the United States in order to vote, what's wrong with that?
I think that it's fine as long as you allow for people to get citizenship much more easily than we do in America.
So if on the next election, if I don't become a citizen, you think it's okay for me to sneak in there and not show my ID that I'm a citizen and vote?
Morally, yes. I think that's a great conscientious objector behavior to engage in. Like that's passive resistance, and I respect your decision to go to jail for that behavior. Yeah, I think that's a deeply moral thing to do. Absolutely, crush him.
So you think I shouldn't be asked for my ID? I should just go in there and vote illegally?
Yeah. If somebody's working at the voting booth, they should just let you walk in and vote. I mean, like, you know, this gets sillier and sillier the more these like gotcha questions come along. But like, I really do think
it's not a gotcha question; it's a real practical question because I'm not a citizen.
Is it a real practical question?
It happens all the time, doesn't it?
What are you trying to understand? What are you trying to learn about from these questions? Well, like, what are you actually trying to understand?
You said that asking for people's ID is a type of racism. You said, right?
Voter ID laws are racist in the way that they have been used and enacted in America in particular.
But it's not, would it be a racist law if they ask me for my ID?
Voter ID laws are applied and used and enacted racistly in America. So if you are part of someone who is being asked for your ID,
it would be racist to ask me for my ID.
Yes, it would be racist to ask you for your ID, just like it'd be racist to ask anybody for their ID because the law itself is racist.
So no matter what race you are, it's racist.
Yes. Because it has racist consequences.
It has racist consequences of me?
Because it systematically disenfranchises certain groups of people more than others for various reasons. So like, you know, laws about like felons not being allowed to vote in America, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Not a single reasonable justification for why a felon who served their time can't vote in America. But we have those laws in many places that have not been overturned. Someone managed to overturn them, thankfully.
It's just bad luck. That they can't
do you understand why those laws exist? I mean, just guess at why we would have a law that says that felons can't vote in America despite it being totally immoral and unreasonable.
Because people, like, let's say it's a murderer, people don't like murderers, so they want to they want to punish them.
Okay, does that seem like a moral argument for that kind of position?
I actually do think one can make a moral argument for that once you do certain things in society, that certain privileges can be removed.
So, and despite serving your time, you can never get those privileges back,
No, I'm
even
not saying
including the right
that.
to
If
vote.
you do your
Well,
time.
that's what the law says. That's what the law says. The law is you can never vote again.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
I'd be
yeah.
against that.
Why?
I think if you've paid your price, paid your
Yeah,
fine, then
it's deeply immoral, right?
you
It seems.
well, yeah, I think I wouldn't use that term, but I would
Sure.
say you've been absolved. You've paid your
So
punishment
why do you think those laws exist in America?
because people want to punish people.
Which people? Everybody.
The people who commit those crimes.
So what you find is those laws are overwhelmingly disproportionately impacting people of color, because our criminal justice system has disproportionately been targeted at people of color, deliberately and then less deliberately, but still consistently over time. And so what you see is that like felon disenfranchisement laws are extremely racist. Some of them sometimes very intentionally, other times still consequentially, in the sense that they disenfranchise vastly more of one group of people than another, despite being an immoral law that no one should be disenfranchised for.
So do you think there's more people of color in jail disproportionately?
Yes,
How about Asians?
for a
Are they in
variety of
jail?
reasons.
They're people of color. Are they disproportionate?
I do not know what the proportion of Asian individuals in jail is. I'm happy to look at the statistics. Do you think there's a disproportionate number of Black people in American jails?
Yeah, per capita, yeah.
Why?
Some of it is what you're talking about, unfairly, but some of it's probably bad luck
What kind of bad luck?
that they committed crimes.
And why do you think those people committed crimes?
Bad luck, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's luck all the way down. And that's
Luck
why I
all the
think we
way
should have a
down.
more rehabilitative, restorative justice system rather than a punitive one. And it's why we should have a less racist justice system
So
than we
when a
currently
person
do.
kills another person, it's just bad luck, right?
Yep.
And when a person imprisons the person for killing another person, that's bad luck.
It's quarantine
It's quarantine.
or rehabilitation, the Swedish model, if you will.
But you're still for that, though, quarantining.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah,
if it's
there's
true,
some need
if it's
for
true,
some
then
amount of it.
that let's say African Americans commit more crimes proportionately, that you would be for
Not commit more
quarantining
crimes,
them.
are put in jail more often. Those are different things, by the way.
Right. But are you for that?
Am I for which thing?
Putting people in jail who commit crimes.
Yes, I already answered that one,
Okay.
I think.
Good. We're agreed.
Right. Now, I also think we should highlight the fact that like the vast majority of people who commit crimes do so not because they are sociopaths, but because they are in a position where they feel like they lack power or control of their lives or desperately need something, and so act in these ways that are counterproductive but understandable, and that we should create a society in which people don't want to commit crimes so that the fewest number of people are in prison as possible, right?
Yeah, that would be nice.
So we reduce the amount of luck that everybody experiences, especially bad luck, right? By doing things like redistributing wealth, by addressing systemic racial inequalities, by et cetera, until we have a society where only people who have the deeply bad luck of being born biologically incapable of understanding morality have to go live on a farm where they don't hurt anybody.
If you think
Like
about
that's
it,
the best case scenario.
if you think about it, it's really bad luck to be born a man, right? Because they're
Yeah.
99% of the prison population.
Yeah, we're terrible, for sure. It's terrible to be born us. I fully agree with you.
Well, we're not morally terrible. It's just bad luck.
No, we just have the bad luck of
Yeah.
testosterone and cultural conditioning and all these other factors that like
We shouldn't be held morally
us
responsible for
unnecessarily.
that.
Absolutely, right? We should, and look, I am all for, I mean, not the men's rights folks because they go the wrong direction with it, but I'm for in principle the fact that we need to talk seriously about harms towards men as well as women, and that like men are being, and like if you look at feminism, if you honestly look at feminism, it's going to say it's important that we help men not suffer from misconceptions about what it means to be a man. Like you have to be abusive.
Do you
towards
think
women.
men are predominantly in jail because of some type of chauvinism against men?
Yeah, I think men are in jail because of a complicated mix of factors. I think part of it's biological and part of it's cultural.
Cultural, you say?
Yeah, in the sense of like Men are taught things that are bad for them to learn, right? Think Pepe Le Pew, right? Women love to be
Wait a
chased.
minute. You're saying
Let's
men,
chase.
some men are in jail because of the way they were raised?
Yes, some men are in jail because of the way they are
Do you
raised.
think some,
Is that
do you
do you
think,
think that's like a controversial
no, no,
thing
no,
that's going
no.
to trigger somebody?
I'm trapping you here. And do you think some,
Oh, okay. I feel very
do you
trapped.
think some races are in jail because of the way they were raised?
Some people of some races are in jail because of the way they were raised. Yes.
Okay. Do you think that could be a better
Again, I do not feel
explanation?
very trapped, but
Do you think
if you're
that might be
trapping me,
an
let me know.
explanation? This cultural explanation might be an explanation why people are in jail?
Oops, sorry. I think it is part of the explanation. I don't think it is the bulk of the explanation, but I think it's a factor worth considering or talking about
Okay.
to some extent.
And you would also apply that to cultural might be a reason why Asians make more money than whites.
There might be something in there, right? For example, if white people in America feel like they have it set because they're white, they don't have to work quite as hard or something like that. Whereas, are you familiar with the model minority concept?
No.
So this is the idea where like a first generation immigrant child feels heavily pressured to do well because they have to show that
Oh,
their
yeah, yeah.
culture deserves to be there or something like that. Then they have to be a model minority. Black people have had to do it in America for years in terms of not pissing off white police officers, for example. But you also see a lot of like amongst certain Asian cultures, this kind of idea of like, you have to be the best in these kind of ways. I come from a half Jewish background, luckily not one that was like this, but I certainly know lots of Jewish individuals who experienced similar kinds of behavior. But you also see it amongst Black culture. Like you see lots
Black
of
culture, you
Black
said?
parents. Yeah, lots of Black parents pushing for their Black children to become educated.
What's black culture? I've never heard of that.
You don't think that all communities to some extent have cultures? Do you think that white culture is a thing?
Nope.
Really?
Nope.
That seems sort of in denial, like saying like wokeness isn't a thing. I think wokeness is obviously a thing, and I think white culture is
You know why I say
obviously a
that?
thing. Why?
Because I've met Irish people, and I've met Scottish people, and I've met German
Mm,
people. They're all white, but they all
right.
have different cultures.
Ah, okay. Do you believe that Black culture is a thing?
No.
Weren't you saying earlier that you seemed like you were suggesting that you might think that like Black culture is a part of the
I
explanation
never
of those
said black
percentages you
culture.
just brought up? Ah, so which culture? So you think Asian culture exists though? Because you said Asian culture was a part of
Nope.
the percentage explanation. Oh, so it's not actually a part of the percentage explanation.
I'm saying that you can have a whole bunch of cultures under the term Asian.
Really?
Yeah.
Now we're getting intersectional. Now you're learning about
Yes.
critical race theory. I'm glad to hear it. Ah, so you do think there are Asian cultures.
Right. Plural.
Okay. And there are Black cultures
Plural. Yes.
and white cultures.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah. So we're
Okay, we're
agreed
good.
on that, right?
Yeah. And I think broadly speaking, we can talk about what we mean when we talk about Black culture in
So
our
remember when you
society,
were
for
saying
example.
about all the Asians, you would have to go deeper into the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that you like that kind of
yeah.
complexity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And
But
you would also do that
look,
with the black culture too, right?
sure.
Cultures.
When I say Black culture, it's implicit to me that there are a bunch of different cultural fields intersecting, and there's no one unifying all Black culture is X.
Right.
But if you prefer me to use the term Black cultures, I can do that just to make that explicit.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can have
Sure.
black people from Africa,
Sure.
black people from the Caribbean.
And there are big differences between them income wise as well.
Why do you think that is? Oh, it's luck. Sorry.
Right. Lots of complex factors, right?
Well, ultimately, it's luck.
Including things like race, including things like the way people are treated because of their race.
Do you think some cultures are more desirous than other cultures?
More desirable, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, I would prefer that no one buy into a Nazi culture.
Okay. How about a culture that values education more than another culture?
Yes, that would be preferable.
Okay. Do you think that has any impact on some of this household income data we're looking at?
Not substantially, in the sense that, again, I can refer you to the book Fugitive
Not
Education.
substantially.
Yeah, read the book Fugitive Education. I really strongly recommend it. It's a book about how Black communities, despite being forcibly prevented from becoming educated, worked really hard to
Black
become educated
communities.
in America. Yes, Black communities. Communities of Black people.
But then isn't it true that black immigrants make more money than whites?
I don't know.
in the United
You can
States?
point me towards the data if you want,
Or
but
I should say
again,
people of color.
right? And do you notice that again? There's this immigration factor when
Right.
you're like, who immigrates to America?
Well, do you have kind of two
What do
extremes?
you know about immigration? Do you know much about immigration? Do you know much about the American immigration system?
Well, I'm just saying that I think I looked up some data a long time ago that said that
Oh, mhm.
immigrants make more money than whites from certain countries, at least.
Yeah. Why do you feel like that would be?
Well, because of what you were saying, because of they have skills.
Because of the skills,
Yeah.
right? Or maybe because of the model minority stuff,
So
right?
wouldn't
It
the
certainly
converse be
wouldn't be
true
that
then?
like which thing?
That if you make less money, it's maybe because you don't have skills?
It could be, right? So you could, for example, be in a poor education system that is not properly funded, and so you're not taught the same amount of what we would call cultural capital as the white kid who gets the tutors and all the extra bells and whistles, and that's how they get into Harvard is because they have all that money to put towards all of their various extracurricular activities, aka luck.
Hmm. And the people who come from poor communities and end up getting PhDs in STEM, for example,
Also luck.
just, Oprah Winfrey, luck.
Yeah,
Michael
yeah.
Jordan, luck.
Yeah, I
Dave
mean, look, Michael
Chappelle,
Jordan especially. Like, come on.
luck.
Are you saying that there's something what else is there besides the luck?
Well, you could say things like getting up early in the morning and exercising.
So hard work, right? This is one of the two main objections to my position,
Yeah.
right? So
But you're saying
what
that's
is
ultimately
hard
luck
work?
too. I get you.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course it is, right? And it is. Because if you had a disease where you couldn't get up early and exercise because you were born that way, for example, right? We would consider that bad luck, right?
Yeah.
Right. So conversely, if you're not born with that disease and you are able to get up in the morning and exercise, we would call that good luck,
But the
right?
thing is, like, if Michael Jordan were here right now,
Sure.
he wouldn't like you
I don't know about that. He might. I'm very likable.
because he apparently was not even. I'm not sure if this is true, but I seem to remember he was not even starting when he was in college. Like he would, if he were here, I think he would say he really had to work.
Well, so let me ask you, do you think that Bill Gates deserves to be rich?
Deserves. I think
Mhm.
he innovated something that people wanted, and that gave him money.
So does he deserve to be rich? Does he deserve to be a billionaire?
Yeah, I'll say yeah.
You will. Okay.
Yeah.
Bill Gates wouldn't like you very much because he disagrees.
Okay.
Right? He thinks that like he got there because of luck. And it's a great book on this, Success and Luck, by Frank, where he basically talks about people like Bill Gates and how they,
But Bill
Warren
Gates
Buffett,
was
they
a
strongly
granola
emphasize.
cruncher tree hugger, right?
Oh, I see. I mean, look, you're not wrong. There's a left-right bias here. If you're a
Yeah.
conservative, you're more likely to believe that it's hard work and that hard work is something separate from
Well,
luck. And if you're more progressive, you're less
well,
likely to
no,
believe
even
that.
I even admitted to you earlier that even if you're right, is this something we want to tell people?
And again, you're an atheist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would be for convincing people that God doesn't exist, even if believing in God.
No, that's not true.
Oh, oh, so if you found, so if I provided you the studies that show that like theists are slightly less likely to steal, you would say let's lie to everybody about God.
I wouldn't say that, but I would probably like. There's many people I've told on my show, my other channel, stay a Christian.
That's different. That's different from I'm going to lie to people,
No, no, but
right?
I'm not saying there's a difference between withholding the truth and lying. We do it with our kids all the time. Like if I,
I think lies of omission are still like when it's something as important as like whether or not you have moral responsibility, just like pretending that you do when you don't is lying, in my opinion.
okay, well, we can agree to disagree on that.
Yeah, I'm just not for lying, and I don't think it actually needs. I don't think you need to lie. Like I think just like atheists can be just as moral as theists.
Like
I
I
think
would say that
people who don't believe in free will are actually more likely to be moral than people who do
I
believe
would
in free
say
will.
that even if we're deterministic, that we can still account for things like moral responsibility by saying
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to make that work, but
because like let's say you and I give this example already about it, let's say you do something that society doesn't want you to do and we zap you every time you do it, you're going to stop.
sure.
You're
Sure.
an animal. You're going to stop, unless you are.
But that's not moral responsibility.
Well, no, but it holds people more accountable, because if they're thinking,
It's just correcting behavior.
right,
Well,
yes. What's the difference between correcting behavior and moral responsibility?
one of them you deserve to suffer, the other one you don't.
Yeah, see, this is the difference between you and I. I think you're talking more about. I'm talking more the pragmatics.
This is an important difference. Yeah, well, like I'm for I'm for positive and when necessary some amount of negative reinforcement. I would prefer
Yeah, and that's all I'm
positive.
talking about.
Yeah, but that's a totally different conversation. That's and
I
like
know, but you're
we
talking
can
about something that
justify.
almost doesn't matter.
No, but it absolutely matters because we already explained how it matters for things like the criminal justice system and whether it's punitive versus retributive versus rehabilitative, for example. What you're talking about is how do we reinforce positive behavior, right? You
Yeah,
want to make people better people, right?
yeah,
And what I'm telling you is you don't need to tell them that they have this magic soul that has moral responsibility in order for them to act well. You just have to be like, that thing you did, wasn't that was really good. You helped that person. Wasn't that pleasurable?
yeah.
And you
I
reinforce in
agree
their
with that.
minds that it's pleasurable to do the right thing. It doesn't have to be you deserve the pleasure, you deserve the praise or something like that. That's not necessary.
Yeah, for you, you feel really icky when you hear the word deserve, because
It's not an icky thing. It's just I think it's harmful to people.
right, it makes them
I
feel
think it
bad.
builds up an it builds up an egoic or shameful. So a flip side of this is like toxic meritocratic shame. So you have individuals who believe they're living in a meritocratic society when they're not, and they aren't succeeding in that society.
But you don't
and
like
so
it because it makes people feel bad.
harming people is bad. I don't think we should lie to them about things that are false, and I doubly don't think we should lie to them when it causes them harm. That's what I believe.
Do you think harming people is always bad?
No.
No, right, of course not. There's many examples where harming people is actually
Right. And what I'm saying
run
is
good.
in this situation, you're harming them for no good whatsoever.
Like, someone could say that forcing parents highly recommending their children to study for a test is causing them harm. They just want to play video games. Why are you hurting me, mommy? I just want to play. No,
Yeah.
you need to do the
Yeah.
X so you can get Y. Now, that's
Sure.
someone would say that's harm, but that's a good harm.
I would call that promoting flourishing.
Yeah,
And I play a lot of video games.
there you go. So I
don't think that's
the difference
inconsistent with
between
my
you and me
view
is,
in the
is
least.
just
But the difference is you think that like so I don't know what you think. The difference for me is there are people who think that like it's good to punish someone who did something wrong and their pain is good because it's good to see punishment meted out to the bad people in the world. Some amount of people genuinely believe that. I don't know if you do or not, but many do.
if you're just doing it for punishment's sake, yeah, I don't agree with that.
Right, because you're an atheist, which means that your cognition is a little bit in conflict, probably, where you have because my understanding is you have conservative leanings, whether you'll openly say your positions or not, and your conservative leanings are going to be in conflict with your atheist leanings because one of them is going to lean towards a more progressive mindset and the other is not. It's true.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying you can't manage to be both at the same time. I'm just saying in the current, especially in the modern world, if you believe science, there's a connection between belief in religion, with conservatism, with belief in a just world. And do you believe we live in a just world?
No.
You don't. So do you believe that America is a just society?
Overall, no. Like, there's just elements. Okay. I think the world can be a very unfair, bad, suffering place.
Do you think we should work to make it better?
Sure.
So in my mind, you're a social progressive. You think that we should use society to improve people's quality of life.
Well, look at that. I'm a social progressive.
Congratulations. I mean,
do I get a medal? It's just luck.
I'm guessing, I'm guessing that like you have a lot of specific policies that specifically are not necessarily tied to that kind of view. But like, look, I think you mostly, it sounds like, agree with me about a lot of this stuff when it's put in terms that don't feel combative.
Yeah, maybe. I think where we differ is I'm more of a practical guy and you're more of icky guy.
That seems unlikely. Given that how much time I spend on applied ethics.
Like you
want to give a specific example.
You have an aversion to the word deserve. right?
No. See, I think you're doing a thing now where you want to suggest that you're the rationalist and I'm the emotivist or something like that. Whereas the reality is, I think I'm probably more rational about these things because I've spent way too much time thinking about them. Um, but like at the end of the day,
You're more
I
rational
think
because you spend so much time thinking about them.
at the end of the day, what I'm saying is I think this thing is wrong because it's logically false, right? I was convinced by the writing of Thomas Nagel that free will doesn't exist logically. And I have since tried to figure out how to reconcile that with my belief that it appears that morals are true. And what does that mean for human beings if morality is true and free will isn't? And I've ended up with this very strange, weird view logically that I have then worked to internalize psychologically. But it's not that I start with an ick factor about people deserving something. I actually, quite the opposite, like most human beings, was raised to believe that like it's good that people deserve rewards and punishments. And I've had to unlearn all of that for, the second half of my life.
Okay.
I would say that you are probably built, hardwired with a lot of sort of social biases about things like dessert. And it's very hard to unlearn them. My experience is almost that like most people have a really hard time fully letting go of the idea that nobody deserves to suffer. Like you think that you probably are still thinking of someone in your mind right now, like that person clearly deserves to suffer, right?
Well, I think some people are suffering right now. And they deserve to by listening to this.
Well, I feel bad for them if they have unfreely had the bad luck of coming here and listening to this. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you've had fun too.
Oh, no,
I'm curious to hear more about where you are at this point on these issues. Do you feel like I've made a case for critical race theory being functional in our
I
society?
don't know. Like, what percent of the time have we even talked about CRT here? I mean,
Do you have any more questions about CRT, since that was why you asked me
well,
to show up?
the ones that matter, I think. Well, I guess we didn't talk about whether it should be taught. Do you think it should be taught at
Yes.
any age?
Yeah. What do you mean, like literally, like at infancy? I
Or
think
like
it's really
kindergarten
complicated.
and up?
Yeah, I think a appropriate to each age level version of discussions around systemic injustice and social power is valuable. Just like I think we should have a moral education from an early age, even though we don't because the religious won't let us.
Yeah. And
Would you be for a moral education in schools?
moral
I'm just
education?
curious. In public schools, would you be for like a secular philosophy class that did moral philosophy on top of all the other things and
What
have that
age?
from the beginning with from the beginning, critical thinking? Kids can do philosophy at a really young age. So like
Yeah,
start
I
them
would
off
have to see
young.
like what that actually means. Like, I'm imagining as soon as I hear philosophy, I'm imagining lectures and kids would be bored to tears. But you're talking more fun
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
I'm talking podcasts like Pickle, which is a really great kids podcast. If there's people with any parents out
What does
there,
pickle do?
Pickle is a podcast that teaches your children to be philosophers, and you will regret it.
What sort of
Because your
things do
children
they teach?
your children are natural philosophers. They always want to ask why to begin with. And this is like, no, it's actually okay to ask, well, what is that? What is a hot dog versus a hamburger? How do we actually define
Oh
things?
yeah,
Like,
that's
very basic philosophical questions that human beings latch on to very early on. So I would be for teaching all of that. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to have to teach them a little bit of what to believe as well as a little bit of how to believe.
yeah. Years ago, I did a video on CRT. I don't even remember everything in it, but there were some crazy people there saying that you should, like, at a very young age, teach white kids that they're oppressors and stuff. Like, you don't buy into that stuff, do you?
Teach them that they're oppressors or
Yeah.
teach them the history of oppression.
No, that because they're white, that they are and live in a white society, that they are oppressors.
That they benefit from white privilege or that they are actively
Yeah, and that
oppressing
they
people.
benefited from white privilege and all.
So that's a different claim, though, than you're actively
But are you
oppressing
for
people
that
right
type of
now.
language in kindergarten to kids?
Again, I would prefer to talk about good and bad luck, but I think at an early age, we could talk about how you're lucky enough to be born into this particular society and therefore benefit from a lot of resources that other people don't have. You're lucky enough to be, in this particular location, in this particular family, or this or that. Like,
We're lucky to
teach
be
teach
born in an Asian family.
teach gratitude and humility early on for everybody.
Mm. Yeah.
Humility, excuse me, not humiliation. I say humiliation, excuse me. Whew,
But you're
too
against,
much.
I'm assuming you're against like dividing people, pitting people.
Am I for talking about different groups of people, or am I for like pitting them against each other in ritual combat?
Pitting them against each other, not in like
I
actual combat.
am against pitting people against each other and for identity politics. How's that?
What did you just say? You are for it?
I am for identity politics and against pitting people against each other.
Okay. You're for identity politics. And what is
I'm
that?
for people coming together in groups based around shared identities, where those shared identities are attached to shared experiences of marginalization, and organizing for the sake of having a better outcome for members of that community.
And when you say, like, how specific do these identities have to be?
Lots of different identities fit that bill. So LGBTQ, different races, feminists, women.
And do you think if you pick someone out of some identity that they're a good representation of the whole community?
No, that seems like a basic fallacy.
Yeah, it seems like bigotry, right?
It seems like you're trying to construct a question that I'm not sure I understand what you're looking for there, buddy.
Like if you see someone with dark skin,
what are you even asking there?
If you see someone with dark skin, can you make assumptions about them here in the United States? No. Okay, we're agreed. And if you see a white person, can you make assumptions about them?
Like statistical inferences? Like, what are you asking? Like statistically speaking, if I see a person of color and you asked me to bet, right? Like making money wise, the white guy or the black guy, which one's more likely to have been pulled over by a cop in their lives?
Right.
Okay. Who are you going to bet on?
The black guy.
Right. Me too.
And if you see an Asian guy and a white guy and I ask who makes more money, where are you going to bet?
I'm going to probably bet on the white guy. Because I think median is not the only indicator on.
What if it's average instead of median?
Is median and average different? Is there a complexity to the statistics that might be obscured by the way that
but if a big enough sample size, they converge. But
right.
So let me ask you again: if you see a white guy and an Asian guy, and you had to bet who makes more money, what would you say?
So if I was in that situation, then I'd say the Asian. But obviously, statistics are more complicated than that, aren't they?
And CRT would say the Asian's oppressed, right?
I'm confused. How come you didn't include that earlier when you understood that math? It seems like a bit of a tricky maneuver to include math that you understand is misinformation in that way.
Oh, I believe in withholding the truth.
Yeah, apparently. You've made that quite clear on several fronts now, it seems.
No. It didn't.
You sure?
It didn't. Yeah.
You seem unsure of yourself now. You seem like maybe you actually do believe in noble eye approaches.
You seem defensive,
sometimes.
like crazy, man.
Oh, I'm having fun. I'm having a great time. This is a laugh. I love this. I love talking about stuff. So, other questions about CRT? Anything else? Any other?
Okay, so you're for CRT.
Yep. In schools, teaching it explicitly,
but not to pit each other against each other.
100%.
Okay, so more positive stuff, and you believe in systematic racism in the United States, but you can't point to any direct laws on the books.
I believe I gave several examples, including the
you mentioned chickens.
The felon law. I specifically described the felons not being allowed to vote, the thing that you said was deeply immoral and that I explained has a history of being related to race.
Okay, so there's more.
Are you confused about that law? Do you need to explain more about why that's a racist law just because it doesn't say black people?
The law about not being able to vote after you're done your time, that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one.
Actually,
that's a racist law. A systemically racist law. Yeah.
Because most felons are people of color.
Because of the history of racially profiling and other various reasons that have the war on drugs. Do you believe the war on drugs is racist, for example?
Not explicitly, no.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think there are any quotes that I could bring up of people specifically saying we should criminalize weed? Oh, so you do think it was explicitly racist at some point?
No.
You don't think the people in charge of banning weed, for example, were deliberately banning it because of which cultures, which communities were using weed more?
Witches, you said?
Oh, buddy. I'm sure you heard what I said.
No, you said witches, right?
No, black people and Latino.
Oh, I thought you said witches.
No, I'm saying that like the specific reason that we criminalized weed in this country when it wasn't criminalized before is because they wanted to target specific racial groups who were known for or viewed as using weed more. even though they don't actually use it at higher rates and are criminalized at higher rates. You know that as well,
So do you
right?
think
Like
that
white people
white people are
use drugs
forcing
more.
people to do drugs?
What?
Do you think white people are
What
forcing?
is that a serious question?
Yeah, the answer is no, right?
Right. So
Okay.
it's a silly question, though, right? Like that's not how any of this works. So I'm not sure what your gotcha is there.
Well, how? Like to me,
Well, do you know much about the history of the war on drugs?
are you talking about Nancy Reagan,
Amongst other horribly
Pablo
immoral
Escobar?
individuals? Yeah, yeah. Do you know the history of Reagan? Do you know the history of the rise of our for-profit criminal justice system that like houses a vastly disproportionate number of our population? Like,
So was it
I
Reagan
guess the question
who?
is, when you say that I haven't given examples of systemic injustice, I'm asking you, how much do you know about the history of
I'm here to
America,
learn from
including the
you.
recent? Okay, then I'm trying to assess your level of ignorance in this way.
Yeah, just assume I'm very ignorant. I'm okay with that.
Okay, if you are maximally ignorant, then let me explain. The war on drugs
Yeah.
is part of a history of criminalizing certain communities so that they can be imprisoned for various reasons, partly because we're a racist
Like
culture
which
and we're at that
drugs?
point in time. Like weed, like crack. Do you know about the racial like the disproportionate sentencing laws for crack versus cocaine?
No.
Oh, see. These are like basic, very, very basic examples of racial like laws in
So
society.
okay, so there was people who decided that 95% or something of people of a certain skin color use this drug. So if we make this drug illegal, we can put them in jail. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying there were some of the people involved in criminalizing it explicitly had those beliefs, yes.
Okay.
And others
And is that happening
were
today?
doing it for other reasons. I believe that Obama was actually the one who fixed those particular racial
Okay, so
sentencing
it's not
laws.
happening anymore.
But there are still quite a few people in jail serving under those unjust racial sentencing laws.
Okay, yeah, I tend to.
So yes, it is still happening today is the answer to your
Right, they're still in jail.
Slightly ridiculous question.
Yeah.
Yes, they are still in jail.
Right.
Just like people who are redlined into lower income settings are still in those lower income settings and their families are still
Redlined
suffering
into?
from the yeah. Do you know how redlining worked? Do you know what redlining was?
Yeah, explain it to me.
Okay, so redlining is when you have individuals who've been violently forced into ghettos by white violence, then being treated as a higher risk for things like mortgages. And so their houses are valued less, their communities are valued less.
How did they
So
force them in
their
those communities?
with violence, with literal violence. There's a great book called Sundown Towns about the
Okay,
history
and is that still happening today?
the violent. What do you mean? Yes, it is still happening today. There are still parts of this country where if you are in a certain place after dark and you are a certain race, it is a bad idea for you. Yes.
That's redlining, being a certain race in a.
No, that's sundown towns. Redlining is what happened after the sundown towns, after they forced Black people out of various communities and into ghettos.
Okay, I'm confused. So everything you've said about redlining and the drugs, you're saying happened, but it's not happening
And
anymore.
is continuing to harm people right now who were alive when it happened.
But legally it's not
as
happening.
well as their descendants. Yes. Legally, we live under increasingly race-neutral laws, though again, several of those laws are still racist in the sense of the voting rights and the federal and the like the bans against felons.
So we've come a long way,
vote.
is what you're saying.
It is still happening now, is the answer to your question. These problems are still happening now.
Okay,
yes.
But we've come a long way, is what I'm learning from you.
We have made some progress.
Yes. Some? It sounds like tremendous, what Obama did.
Given how bad we were coming from, I mean, anywhere but up when it's slavery, right?
Yeah, slavery's horrible.
Right. And when you start at such a horrible position, being so fucking terrible to people, anything looks like progress, but we still have a lot to do. So, for example, education, right? We desegregated schools in America, didn't we?
Yeah, that's good, right? Desegregation.
Yeah, yeah. And would it shock you to learn? Would it shock you to learn that our schools are still overwhelmingly segregated in a variety of places, in a variety of ways? That it's still very, very bad segregation-wise in schools?
Yeah, we're both against segregation, right?
We're both against segregation, yes.
You're against segregation. Good, good.
I'm against segregation.
You're against Black colleges?
No, I am not against historically Black universities.
What if
Would I be against them never admitting white people? Yes.
okay. Would you be for white colleges that lets like 2% black people in?
If you had a history of whites being systematically prevented from going to higher education for hundreds of years, no.
You got to balance out that pendulum is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, applied ethics is complicated,
Yeah.
yes. And understanding history is important if you're going to understand any of this stuff.
Where do you think, like, given the progress we've made, where do you think United States is compared to other populous countries? Like, are we doing good?
I saw your video about this actually. Yeah. Are we doing good compared to who and on
compared
what
to China?
On what factor?
On racism.
It depends, like how you're going to classify racism, right? You're going to have to take into account a lot of factors.
Which country's more racist, United States or China?
I wouldn't give an all of the above answer to a question like that because I think it's very complicated, right? Like,
is United States more racist than China, you think? It's another way of asking the same thing.
Didn't I just answer the question? I literally just said I would not give an all of the above answer to a question like that because it obscures a lot of complexity. Are the Chinese systematically engaged in the extermination of Uyghurs? Yes. Is that worse than the systematic extermination going on in America? Yes.
Like if
it's more out in the open. It's more explicitly than we are doing to Native Americans right now.
Let's say you have a person of color who's your friend, and they have to make a choice of either living in the United States or China, but they're worried about racism. They come to you for advice because you've done a lot of study on this stuff.
Which race are they again?
I don't know. They're just a person of color.
Well, I guess it would depend, right?
Okay, let's say they're African American.
Okay, if they're African American, I don't know. I'm going to assume that they're going to be treated poorly in both countries. I'm not sure what the answer would be there. I think they're probably slightly better off in certain parts of America. But if they're in other parts of America, they're worse off.
How about...
Having lived in the South, I know that for a fact.
So you don't want to pit the United States against any other country and say which is more racist?
No, that seems like a pointless activity to me.
Why is it pointless?
I think we should just try to make country... Because it's, again, a very broad claim when you have a lot of complexity going into these assessments. Like, again,
see, my theory is you don't want to do it because you don't want to make the United States sound good.
No, I think that's silly. So, like, take for example, Russia during the Cold War, right? Is Russia more racist than America during the Cold War? No.
I mean, today, right? Today.
Today, I don't know what the Russian culture is like. I don't know if they've gotten worse on that, but there was a lot of talk during the period of the Cold War where America... So some arguments that America actually enacted its civil rights because it was afraid of looking bad compared to the Russians, because we kept having black soldiers go off to war and then come back and be partial citizens. So I would argue that, like, we have a lot of work to do, and it's not really worth it to just say, oh, well, we're better than China. Why does that matter? Why is that important at all?
I'm just trying to get you to say that United States is less racist than China. That's all.
I know, and it seems like a silly game to try to get me to say something like that when it's more important to discuss the details of, like, what are these particular cultures doing that is racist? Do you agree both cultures are racist?
Yeah, I'm asking you which one you think is more.
Oh, then I don't think it matters. I think as long as we agree they're both racist, it doesn't matter. Let's just work on our own culture.
Doesn't matter to the degree of racism?
Why would it matter? What's the reason it matters?
Well, because isn't less racism better than more racism?
Yes, but why does it matter for your actual behavior? That's not no, matters for action. What actions would it change to prove that America was less racist than China? What single behavior should it impact?
Oh, just to get you to say something nice about the United States.
I'm trying to be applied in my ethics, and it sounds like we're trying to play language games for your amusement.
I'm just trying to get you to say, hey, the United States is less racist than China. That's all.
I don't know that it is. I think if you ask about specific... Is America less racist towards Uyghurs than the Chinese? Yes.
Which country is more diverse, United States or China?
Is Japan generally more racist? Possibly, actually. I think there's some evidence that suggests that the Japanese are more xenophobic. Yeah, I think there's some case to be made that the Japanese, as a culture, have been taught to be more insular and xenophobic even than Americans. You see an issue with their immigration as a result. Are we still a very racist culture? Yes. Like, what's the benefit of this conversation? I just think it's better to point out that, like, both Japan and America have a lot of work to do about race. Would you agree? Both America and Japan have a lot of work to do about race. I know the chat is very fun and all, but, like,
yeah, sure. Always
okay, great. Then we agree.
Yeah.
then it's always good to make
But
improvements,
I
right?
just find it
'Cause you're a social
interesting.
progressive like me.
I just find it interesting that it's, well, you kind of already, I take it back. You basically did say just now that United States is not as racist as Japan, right? Or did I hear you incorrectly?
I would say that Japanese culture is particularly xenophobic about non-Japanese people, very broadly speaking, is what I understand, having never lived there, having talked to people who do live there. Can you have more or less racist cultures?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it a worthwhile assessment to try to figure out which is a more or less racist culture, China or America? No, not really.
But it kind of just doesn't
There's
fit
no
the
benefit.
narrative. Like if you actually start
What narrative? What
the
narrative are you
narrative
like
of
trying to get me
the
to agree
narrative
to
that
so that you
United
can attack
States
me
is a
for
very
it?
racist place.
It is a racist
Right,
place.
but it's less
China's
racist than
also
China and
racist.
Japan.
So what? If they're all three very racist, who the fuck cares? Right? Right? Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong.
Well,
I'm not wrong. If they're all very racist, it doesn't matter that
so
one
you
is
can have
5%
people
less racist.
So you believe you can
right?
have
They're
people
all
of color
racist.
who are racist, right? Or is that
Yes, of course you can
okay?
have
So
people of
some
color who are
CRT people
racist.
won't say that.
I know, and you're desperate for me to say things that they will say instead of the things I actually say.
I'm just learning this about you because that's
no,
the
I
question
believe
should
that
ask.
everyone can be racist both implicitly and explicitly.
Okay, yeah. See, you're much better than some of the other followers of CRT.
There are lots of CRT people who believe this. There are some people who believe that racism should be a term that's defined solely in terms of power and power relations. I don't agree with those people, but they have an argument that's at least worth discussing in general, because part of the problem they're highlighting is that individuals often, when they talk about racism, only want to talk about explicit personal psychological racism, where I hate X because they're black, right? And so they primarily want to talk about that side of things, and they emphasize, the stuff that you're referencing here. And I think it would be better that we not take that particular approach. But I also think it's the case that I can be racist towards white people.
Yeah.
So when we talk about systemic racism, we should talk about how in America, for example, black people can't really be systemically racist at a large, maybe at a very small scale, but not at the scale that white people can be, right?
Wait, you do believe that or don't believe that?
I do believe that. Because, again, this is just like the history of systems being in place that
and when you say black people,
benefit white people.
You mean African American?
Yes.
Yeah, which is a subset of black people.
Sure.
Okay.
Though African American is a complicated term because not all of them identify as African American after multiple generations. Many of them have come to accept black as a more basic term than African American.
So is that racism or is that bigotry? Like, did you distinguish between the two terms?
I think bigotry, it'd be fine if we wanted to use bigotry as referring to the explicit psychological kind of racism. And I think it's better to disambiguate the word racism into personal racism and systemic racism.
Because if we want to be clear, really a lot of the examples you gave of systematic racism in the past is really really bigotry against African Americans.
And systemic racism arises when you take out the bigotry, but the systems that were built by it continue to harm people disproportionately on the basis of race.
Oh, so you're saying that people see two people of the same skin shade, whether they're African American or not, doesn't make a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So like when you go to get a loan, for example, and the AI decides whether or not you deserve a loan, if the AI is programmed on, the history of racist data, it might do a racism in that kind of situation without anybody consciously wanting to do a racism.
This loan thing, do you think everybody deserves a house?
Yeah, I think everybody deserves basic needs like food, water, shelter. Like, not deserves, but I think it would be good for us to
you don't
give everyone. No one deserves anything.
There you go.
Like,
I caught you
right.
there.
No one deserves anything. But if you want to use that, if you're so desperate to use the word, right?
So nobody deserves a house.
In the sense that like every sentient being doesn't deserve to suffer, right? The implication is we should provide them food, water, shelter, and space.
Who's we?
Anyone who understands their moral obligations well enough to act on them
Society,
successfully.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sounds great.
Like I got a 16-year-old son. In that sense of deserve, does he deserve a house?
in the sense that like he should be able to flourish as an individual.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
his own house.
And having a
not,
house
not to live with me, but
Oh.
he's 16 years old. Do you think he deserves a house?
Would it be good to live in a society where your 16-year-old child was able to afford a house?
I'm asking you.
Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes. It would be good that we had a society where, just like our grandparents' generation, millennials were able to have a single job that allowed them to afford a house. Or some sort of living arrangement.
You afford a house, you said. It's good to be able to...
Yeah.
So if you can't afford it, then you shouldn't have a house.
No, they should be able to have a house. Afford, by which I mean like the goods and services are paid for as needed. But like we should all
Paid
you know,
by
we should
who?
have basic income. Like, you know, we can get into the complications of economics if that's what your question is, but like broadly speaking, do you think people should die in the streets poor and alone and cold?
No.
No, it seems bad, right?
Yeah.
Let's not do that. That's my point.
Okay.
Do you know the studies that show that like if you provide housing to homeless people, it's the most effective way to help them then get back on their feet?
Yeah. Stability.
So are you for that?
Sure. But
Great,
there's
we're
a
on the
difference
same page.
between, let's say, renting and owning.
I think people should be able to live in places and not be at risk of being kicked out of those
so it's
places.
it's not about necessarily
like,
being able
yeah.
to buy a house then and having your own. It's just having a roof over your head, right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well,
but
my
sure.
point is, like, let's say you're a mortgage company. There's nothing wrong with being a mortgage company and giving out loans, right? There's nothing immoral about that, is there?
You ever heard the phrase, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism?
There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. No.
Right. That anything you consume under capitalism is going to involve some amount of exploitation of some individuals.
So you're against capitalism in general?
Yes, but that's, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm for some amount of for-profit. I'm also for some amount of private or public, you know, healthcare.
What
like
for-profit are you for?
The things that aren't essential for your life.
Like shoes and stuff. Well, maybe even shoes.
Food, water, shelter, space.
Okay. So you think the government should, or society should, provide all that for you?
Yes.
Non-profit.
If you are unable to provide it for yourself, and that we should create a society in which people can provide for their families.
But if you want to buy a little trinket,
things that promote flourishing.
But if you want to buy a little trinket, then it can be for profit.
Sure. Okay.
Well, thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Thanks. This has been fun. I hope this helped a little bit with understanding the CRT perspective. I hope you are a little more sympathetic to the idea that there is some systemic injustice still in the world, even if you feel like you don't believe it exists or something.
Well, the examples you gave me were. Do
you understand the examples?
The examples you gave me were basically that there's still people in jail for drugs.
Still people in jail for drugs. Still people not being allowed to vote when they should be allowed to vote.
Yeah, and then you mentioned also Jews can't kill chickens. And what
Another classic, interesting example.
And what else did you mention?
They're actually allowed to right now. That law is not in place yet. So you would understand. You would agree that's at least two examples of systemic injustice that exists in the world that you're against.
Systemic injustice, and by systemic you mean widespread?
No, by systemic I mean not being explicitly enacted by people who deliberately hate the people that it is harming, but it is still continuing to systematically harm them. It's also widespread. You can also argue
what's a synonym for systematic?
Non-intentional.
Non-intentional.
Sure.
So now your question is, do I believe there's non-intentional laws that cause people of color to suffer?
No, laws that are not enacted in a way that is intentionally made to cause people to suffer.
Laws that are not enacted, you said.
Laws that are enacted in a way that is not intentionally aimed at causing disproportionate suffering to marginalized individuals,
but
continues to cause suffering to marginalized individuals.
So it's more like hidden racism.
Except when we make it very visible, and then it's visible.
So systemic racism today is like the little, it's like the ghost in the closet. It's not really there until
except I point you to the ghost, and you can actually see the ghost, and the ghost is ruining people's lives, right now in the world.
Like,
So not much like a ghost at all. More like a system. More like a systemic injustice.
like
I don't know why you're struggling with the term systemic injustice. I think you
I'm just
understand
trying
it
to get
quite
the
well.
definitions clear.
Yeah, no, I think you're trying to compare it to things that seem bad or irrational to believe in, even though you believe in the things that I'm saying exist. Do you think that the things I'm saying exist? Do you think the fugitive, the federal, the felon law exists?
The felon law. What is
The
that?
law that prevents felons from being allowed to vote. Do you think that that law exists?
Yeah, I already agreed with you on that one.
Okay, so you think that exists.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a bad thing?
Yeah, I think if once you paid your price, we already talked about this. Yeah.
Do you think it disproportionately harms people of color?
That could be true, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, so assuming for the sake of argument that it is,
Yeah.
because
But here's the difference between you and me. Did someone force them to be a felon in the first place?
what do you mean?
Why are they
Like, did somebody hold a gun to every person's head who commits a felony and force
like?
them to
Okay,
commit the
let's
felony?
take a very specific example.
Sure,
Someone kills
do it.
another person,
sure.
and let's say we have 10 units of blame. Well, you actually don't like that, right? You don't like blame.
Yeah.
So
Nope,
I don't.
sure
I
don't.
don't even know how.
Why did the person kill the other person? Let me ask you that.
Uh,
What was the reason?
let's say they just didn't like. They hate each other. I don't know.
Okay, so they just hate them personally,
Yeah.
right?
So
So what is our goal for imprisoning that
like
person?
a normal person, sorry, a person unlike you, I could ask this question, but I can't ask it of you. I could ask, okay, someone
That
kills
must be hard.
someone kills another person, and they're a person of color, what units of blame do we place on society, and what units of blame do we place on that individual out of 10 units, let's say?
What do you mean by, like, what is the goal of placing a unit of blame?
I know this doesn't apply to you because you don't blame.
I know, but I'm trying to understand, like, why do you think we need to place blame? What is your goal here?
Well, to make
Is
people
it to decide what we're going to do
when
next?
it comes to holding people accountable, do we hold?
Okay, so all you're concerned about is what caused the behavior, such that we can affect those causes, such that we can change those causes, right?
Yeah. So
that's really all you care
like
about. So
a person
blame
not
doesn't
like
matter.
you, I could ask this question to and ask them.
Right.
And
So blame doesn't matter. Just talk about causality, right? What caused the person's
Aaron,
behavior?
hang on.
Yeah, I'm trying to help you. Use language that is less loaded.
So this is an example.
What you mean is, if somebody caused a murder, why did they do it? What were the reasons that they did it for? Right? Was it social or was it biological? Is that your question?
So my question is, what units of blame would you place on the system, and what units of blame would you place on the individual?
You'd have to look at each case,
Right.
And like, if by blame you don't mean blame, you actually just mean causal influence.
Yeah.
Right? Then you'd have to look at all the causes and say, well, did this person have a tumor in their brain? Well, were they, raised in a family of murderers? Like, what? There are different factors for different individuals, depending on what you figure out is the actual cause.
I've asked this question many times of
approach.
certain people, and they actually don't respond the way you respond. They would say, well, okay, I'd say 6 units of blame on the individual who did the killing, and I'd say 4 units of blame on the society around them. Other people
without knowing anything about the society or the individual. Does that seem weird to you?
And then other people will say, well, no, it's they did the killing. 9 units of blame. Sure, they might have had a rough childhood, and sure, they might have experienced
conservatives. You can just say conservatives.
And sure, they might have systematic racism played influence, but give 9 to 1.
Sure.
But I'm getting the sense you don't even want to entertain that thought experiment. It's just like, no, we don't even put numbers on these things, right?
What I'm saying is you want to figure out why the person did the thing so they're not going to do it again, right?
Okay.
So you have to look at the individual and assess to what extent is this the result of character, where character is one kind of luck, constitutive luck, or is it the result of circumstances, aka circumstantial luck?
Okay.
Right? In neither case do we need to assign blame to anybody.
Okay, so let's say
do we need to fix the person's psychology or the environment?
What scenario would you place 9 units of blame on the individual, and in what circumstance would you place 1 unit on the society?
If the individual was born a low empathy, antisocial personality disorder individual, and they were born into an incredibly ethical society, and despite all of the efforts of their moral educators, they still committed a bunch of immoral acts, we would say it's the result of their character, not the environment. Let's put them in a place where they can't hurt themselves and others.
Okay, and then reverse it. 9 units of blame to society and no blame to them, or very little blame to them.
if human beings were somehow magically the sorts of creatures that were perfectly moral beings, but society was somehow brought about to be a horrible, evil dystopia, like Harrison Bergeron style or something like that, then I would say it's mostly the responsibility of the society.
Okay. And now,
But the reality is it's very complex for most individuals most of the time.
where do you place the United States in that? So imagine we're now judging the United States of America.
Sure.
Compared to other countries, I guess. I don't know. Would you say that the problem is mostly society or mostly individuals?
Also, let's see. America has, as of September 23rd, the incarceration rate of America was the highest in the world at 716 people per 100,000. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world by population. Is it because Americans are just really bad people?
Could be.
You think? You think the odds are good that we're just like a really sociopathic culture?
Look at our history.
Fair enough. I won't argue with you on that. No, but no, I disagree. Like I think all
Well, you're not going to
over-
argue against me, but you still disagree?
No, even in 19, I'm joking. I agree with you in an ironic fashion, but unironically, even in 1930s Germany, most people are good people.
This is the Wild West we live in.
Most people are good people. We are biologically pro-social creatures. We tend to care
Yeah.
deeply about fairness. We have, blind spots about in-group versus out-group biases, but I would argue that humans, it's much easier to make you moral than immoral. I think it's not, it's also
Yeah.
fairly easy to make you immoral, but like we're very malleable creatures.
Well, what percentage
So
of the United States
nature
is
of humanity is
incarcerated?
malleability.
Did you have that number right
A
there?
vast percentage, a very high percentage.
What percentage of the United States are incarcerated?
The United States leads the world in total, more than 2 million prisoners nationwide.
Okay, what's 2 million divided by 350 million?
Um,
That's still pretty low, right?
nearly 1% of the adult population.
0.006%. No, sorry, 0.6% of our nation's income. That's still, yeah, I agree with you. We got a pretty good nation.
We're generally good people,
Yep.
right? And society can make us better. And so what I would generally
Or
say
worse.
is, I would say America shares a significant portion of the blame for continued problems, because I think there are a bunch of systems. And like, again, I'm not trying to met out blame, but if you're talking about pure pure causal influence, I think things like low road capitalism, which has led to a hollowing out of the middle class and a radical wealth gap, is bad for people and makes them act less morally.
Yeah, when they see other people with more than them.
Or when they just don't have enough to feel stable. And like most people commit crimes because they don't feel like they have the basic quality of life, or they don't feel respected. If we
Yeah.
as a culture made everybody feel respected and had them a basic quality of life, I don't think you'd see a lot of crime, as long as you decriminalize things that shouldn't be criminalized, like drugs.
Yeah, that's a problem when people have this need to feel respected.
I mean, I think it's good to help people feel respected, but you want them to feel respected because of things that like are intrinsically valuable, not just for anything.
Like, I know you and I lean determinist, but this question I think still makes sense. Do you think it's easier to control ourselves or control society around us?
I would say it's easier to control society.
Ah.
I mean, like, what do you mean in the sense of control? Like, obviously, we're seeing in our current democracy how that's going. But like, I think if you're trying to look for an entry point into changing people's behavior, and you're looking either towards the individual or their environment, I would focus on the environment. If for no other reason, then I don't think you're going to be very good at making human beings who can act morally in immoral situations. And an unjust
But you
society
heard my question,
is a deeply...
right? Is it easier to control yourself or the people around you?
You said society, not the people around you.
Same thing. Society is the people around you.
Well, I mean, society is also the constructs, the laws.
Is it easier to control yourself or the people around you?
The people around you.
Wow. You can control...
Have you tried controlling yourself?
Can you control me right now?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, of course I can influence you in
You
various
can
ways.
influence me, yeah.
What do you think control is?
Do you think but the question is, which do you think you can influence more? Like, let's say could you think you can influence yourself more than me, or me more than yourself?
About what? Like
Anything.
this is a trivially
Let's
simple,
say
like
let's say
it's a
drinking
vague
a glass of
question. It's
water.
unanswerable.
Drinking a glass of water.
Oh, can I pick up my glass and not make you pick up yours? Yes, I do not have the voice like in Dune.
Right. You have more control over your choices than mine, right?
Again, you are asking for a very, very broad claim when it's only true in certain
Why
situations.
can't you just say yes?
There are
Doug, you're right.
situations
I can control myself better than I can control
because
you.
I think you don't understand how social learning theory. Like I don't think you understand that we are social creatures
Can you
and what
choose
that
to
what
stand
that
up right
means.
now? Yes.
Yes. I know,
Can
but
you
I
choose
feel
for
like you're
me to
missing the
stand up
point for the
right
sake
now?
of trying to make a simpler, less elegant point.
I think
You know what I mean?
I think you're pushing back
Do you
on
think that we
this.
can control people?
I think
mean, do
you're
you think that we
pushing
can
back
control
on
people's
this
behavior
because
through
that
society?
simple question
It's not a very good question is the
puts
problem. I'm trying to help you
pressure
understand why it's a poorly phrased question. Why do you think it puts pressure on me? What do you think is the implication of your overly simplistic idea
because
here?
it will weigh personal responsibility over this whole systemic idea.
It
That's
doesn't though. I mean, like, do you think that like people who like let's say that the black people are much disproportionately represented in our prison population, right? Well, what's the explanation most likely? Is it because black people are biologically prone to violence and race and like crime?
I think it's partly cultural.
You think it's partly cultural? And by culture there, I'm going to guess you mean things like rap culture?
No. I
What do
mean,
you mean? What part of black culture makes it more likely for them to commit crime?
it's a subset of uh, of black culture that might value certain things less than other cultures,
Why don't you say more? I'd like to understand
like
what you mean.
education, like fatherhood.
Okay. Where do you see evidence that these individuals value this thing less?
In their actions and words.
Such as,
Low percentage rate of fathers in the home.
yeah, and why are there a low percentage rate of fathers in
See,
black homes in
yeah,
America,
and
do you
you would
think?
say it's because of the society around them, right?
Which has done things like what?
Oppress them, make them feel bad.
Incarcerated them at disproportionate rates for
Yes.
drug use, for
Yeah.
example?
Okay. Now this gets exactly to my question. So
Right.
there's a drug on the table in front of you, in front of me.
You ever done drugs?
No. Well,
Ever been addicted to anything?
yes.
Okay. What were you addicted to?
Nicotine and caffeine.
Okay. So when there was a drug on the table in front of you and you were addicted to it, could you resist?
Yes.
But you were addicted to it. What do you mean by addicted
Well,
to
it
it?
gets your definition of addicted. I've gone.
Yeah.
I've
What is your definition of addicted?
I've gone 6 months without nicotine because I had to, but
But you want to smoke cigarettes
yeah,
right now,
but I
right?
chose not to. Yeah. No, I didn't ever. Not cigarettes. It's gum.
Why did you choose not to?
After I stopped,
Yeah.
because I found out. The only reason why I stopped was because of an eye disease I had.
So if you hadn't had the bad luck of having that eye disease, you'd still be chewing nicotine right now?
Well, I am right now because it went away. The eye disease.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
But the point is,
but you're doing it. You're choosing. You're freely choosing to do this drug.
Let's
you're
get the word
to
freely
again.
out of there.
But you said you said responsibility. You talked about personal responsibility. I'm assuming that's hanging on something, right?
Right, but I'm not aware of all the cause and effects out there. I'm not omniscient.
But you don't need to be. Why would you need to? Why would you need to be aware of them for them to?
You don't believe we can make choices?
I believe that what you think you do when you make choices is an illusion.
Oh, okay.
Right? You think you're making a choice, and you ascribe to some part of the causal chain.
We're still making a choice.
You ascribe personhood to some part of the causal chain. But when we say you make a choice, what we mean is there are two reasons, and one of them wins out. And the question of which one wins out is a matter of your character plus your environment.
If I choose to drop this pen right now, you're saying really it's not a choice?
Right.
Okay.
Not in the sense that we can hold you responsible for it.
But the fact of the matter is that I don't see the future and how long eventually at some point drop this pen.
But that doesn't, I mean, it doesn't matter at all whether you can see the future or not. It's just a fact that, like, whichever action you end up doing is going to be the result of factors beyond your control.
But we are not aware of those factors, right? You agree with that?
That doesn't matter, though, does it? We can become aware of them if we want to.
No, what I'm saying is that even because we're not aware of those factors, we act like we could have done otherwise, even if we couldn't.
If you don't understand my view, in which case...
No, I do understand your view.
If you understand my view, you would stop doing that, though. You would stop acting like, oh, because I don't know what the cause is, I'm going to pretend this person's responsible.
No, it's not a pretending. It's we make these choices and we act as if we could have made a different choice.
I don't.
You don't at all?
I don't think you could have made a different... Like, literally, what would it mean to say you could have made a different choice? We live in one deterministic universe.
I'm making it as simple as, like...
I know. And I'm helping you understand that there's an illusion here.
Choose one.
Feels like simplicity. It feels like simplicity, but it's really just an illusion.
Right. Yes, I agree with you. But that illusion is good.
No, it's a bad illusion. It's harmful.
Because
then you start holding people morally responsible, and then you start punishing people in ways they don't deserve.
Okay, but what if someone is pre-programmed to punish people who don't deserve it?
Then we should help them understand how to do better by changing their programming.
But why are you helping them? You think you can change the future?
Yes, you can help people.
No, it's predetermined. It's predetermined, Aaron.
You're not understanding determinism very well then, right? If I convince you of an argument... You're choosing
to help people, right?
Let me help you understand, right? If I convince you of an argument... my wife just got home. No, this is a common, like a basic 101 misconception about determinism, that determinism means that we can't influence things, right? So...
That's the point I was making.
I think you're confused. Let me try to clarify. If I convince you of a position, right? If I change your mind about something... Mm-hmm. For example, do you choose to believe the new thing, or are you compelled to believe the new thing?
Do I choose or am I compelled? Well, under strict determinism, you're compelled.
Right. And if you're reasonable, if you're a rational individual, you'd also, I think, want to say I was compelled, right? It wasn't that I freely chose to believe an argument I didn't actually...
And if I reject it...
I'm also compelled, right?
So really...
Right. You're compelled either way.
So really, you're a fatalist.
But if I'm lucky enough to convey new information to you, and I change your beliefs, and that changes your behavior, have I not influenced your behavior?
Yes. And if I say things that influence you and you change your behavior, and a year from now you become a capitalist, have I not changed your behavior?
Absolutely, which is compatible with denying the existence of free will. I just want to clarify for you that you can be a determinist and still think it's worth acting in the world.
Yes, that's the point I was making too.
I know, and I was helping you explain.
When I asked you the question about which can you control more, yourself or the people around you, that's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, but that's like a much more complicated psychological question. If you think about the nature of human biases and social learning, right, you might be better off not trying to change
by me
your own
asking
biases,
that question of you, which is easier to control yourself or the people around you, I'm trying to influence you to see the world my way.
Well, yeah,
and it's a matter of luck whether you accept it or reject it.
Think about human beings and beliefs, for example. Do you believe that human beings are somewhat irrational creatures? Biased towards their own beliefs?
Definitely.
Prefer their own beliefs, right?
Definitely.
It's very difficult to convince someone to change their mind in that kind of way.
Yep.
And it's very difficult for an individual to freely change their own mind without various amount of pushing. Can we agree?
Right.
So it seems to me it's easier to create a society where someone is taught the right things.
The right things?
Yeah, the objectively right, like don't be a Nazi.
The objectively right things? Who decides that?
Yes. Oh my God, that's a whole separate question. You keep jumping to separate debates,
right? As atheists, we say society.
No, society doesn't decide it. Society discovers it.
Okay,
it's a different thing.
And how do we discover the right, objectively right things?
By a mix of reasoning and intuitions.
That's plagued with biases, right?
Yes. So just like the way we discover how do we discover the laws of probability?
Yes, I agree with you. So we got these biases that we're constantly having to check, and that's why the scientific method's so useful.
And often it can be better. So the scientific method is useful because you can't change individual humans, but you can create a society in which we overcome the biases of individual humans and change everybody's beliefs by using the scientific method. So in that sense, it's easier to change the group than it is for you to change yourself as an individual. That's the basis of social learning theory and education.
But each individual has to play its part in order to change society, yes?
insofar as they are the things that are acting out parts of society,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
But
That
they
gets
are
back to what I was
determined in their
saying.
behavior by society as well as their biology.
Like, let's say you want me to join you as an ally to change the world to make it a better place. And I say,
yes,
no.
right. And I would appeal to something you find valuable.
And if everybody were to do what I just did and said, no, go away from me, do you think society's going to change? No, is the answer.
Obviously.
You're right.
Why is that a gotcha?
It's, well, don't view it as a gotcha. View it as,
Oh, come on. It's clearly meant as a gotcha. But
well,
it's
if you
okay.
feel
Go
like
ahead.
I got you, then
No, I feel
kudos
like you
to
got
me.
me, but I feel like you think you got me. So I'm trying to understand why you think you got me.
Because it takes the individuals to act to make these choices in order to change the society.
And what influences individuals' behavior?
We're back to this. Okay.
I'm just trying to help you understand. Like, there's a cycle. There's
I am
not
so
an
happy.
easy
You're
entry
so
point.
glad to help me.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think I think that you wanted to try to understand this to some extent, as well as to prove me wrong. And I hope that you feel like you've done one of those things.
Thanks for coming on, Aaron.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Oh my goodness. How long have we been going? Whoa, that was fast. 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm willing to have other people come on if you want to come on. Give their thoughts, comments, reactions. Just press on the pin link up above. Thanks for the conversations, Doug. I came late. Good conversation. Do we call in? Dear Lord. Good talk. Good riddance. Yeah, Aaron and I are just so far apart on the sort of how we see the world. Like, I knew that question I gave him about, is it easier to control yourself or the people around you? It was a gotcha question, because if he says it's easier to control yourself, then it just shifts how you view the world, right? Then you look in the mirror and you blame yourself before you blame society for the choices you make. But if you answered, no, it's easier to change society, well, then you can take the pressure off yourself and say, well, it's not really my fault. It's society's fault for the way I am or the way things I do. And so that's how he answered. But then when I ask him about each individual has to do their part to change the society, then he's back to, Off the top of your head, was something he said that you agreed with? Off the top of my head, it was that people who've been incarcerated can not vote. I think that's bad. Was he recommended by Nathan? Well, I saw that they went live, and I was unavailable at that point. And said, and then someone in the comments said, "Hey, you should talk to Pine Creek." And I said, "Yeah, that's a good idea." But I just don't know how he can be a teacher and grade things the way he grades. Like, if I was one of his students who was conscientious, got my stuff in on time, and then I see my friend sloughing off and getting the same grade or close to the same grade, like, I thought people who thought like Aaron valued this thing called fairness. If you came late and don't know what I'm talking about, you got to rewatch it. All I'm going to remember is something about chickens. Yeah. That was an interesting. I didn't know that was a law, that you can't kill chickens, and that's a racist law, or implied a racist law because some Jews want to kill chickens. He had a hard time defining white. Oh yeah, I started off with the two hardest things for CRT proponents, some CRT proponents to talk about, to define. For CRTers, what is white is similar to what is a woman. It's really hard to define. And then Asians are the kryptonite to systemic racism in the United States. Seriously, Asians are kryptonite to critical race theory in the United States. And the only way he could get around that is say, well, if you have to look at the data deeper, if you look at the data deeper, then you'll see it's not as good as it is. I mean, or something like that. So my advice, if you're talking to a person like Aaron, talk about two things: Asians, and what does white mean? And yes, I know the difference between median and average. Median's the middle, and average is the sum divided by the total number. But in a big enough sample, they should converge. Maybe not. There's probably cases where you have a big sample and they don't converge. But this is statistics. Yeah, white's very difficult to find. Usually when I've asked people in the past, what does it mean to be white? They say what it's not. It's sort of like the word spirit. Well, spirit is immaterial. It's not matter. Well, what is white? Well, it's not a person of color. Room's open if someone wants to come in. I still think a lot of CRTism is feel sorry for ism. What I did appreciate about Aaron is he admitted that black people can be racist. He admitted that. He admitted that Asians not getting into Harvard because they're Asians is racist. He admitted that. That's good. You got to look on the bright side. Maybe he didn't say it's racist, but it's bad. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about poor white people. Good point, Stephanie. And I think people like Aaron have to admit that there isn't no longer today blatantly racist laws. It's always this hidden thing. Well, we know people of a certain group do this certain drug. If we make that drug illegal, then we can harm them. Come on, someone call in and entertain us. Well, look in the mirror, Jamie. You can call in. I do agree, though, that this whole idea of determinism, free will, on a philosophical level, it's kind of mind-boggling. But yet we still have to live practically, right? And I think Aaron and I were agreed on that too. Like, we influence each other. But I think that's a tough, what he's talking about, when he can look people who work hard and say, hey, luck man, luck woman, don't feel good about yourself. And don't feel bad about yourself. As Frank Turk says, we're just moist robots marching into our pre-programming. The gotcha debate bro model doesn't work on very complex issues. Yes, of course. When we're talking about complex issues, we gotta have the nuance. Like, how dare you ask simple questions, Pine Greek? I mean, it makes us look like fools. Doug's viewer to sub ratio is normally hilarious, but on this channel it's even funnier. Bro has 1 to 5 ratio. What? What do you mean 1 to 5 ratio? 5? Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. For 650 subs, getting over 100 people watching. Pretty good. Little Larry David impersonation. Keep your programming, Doug. Don't change. Well, according to Aaron, I can't, so don't worry about it. I can be influenced, but ultimately, what I believe is a matter of luck. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, like, there's a reason why I am the way I am. It's my programming. So don't blame me. Aaron doesn't blame me, so you shouldn't either. I was only here for Aaron, for the record. Well, welcome, Dargendorp. Not simple questions, simplistic, uninformed questions. You know, some questions are good questions, and other questions are simply uninformed questions. If you have taken the time to study like I have, you would know your questions are silly, immentile, benign. I don't know these esoteric terms. Banal, that's the word, banal. Don't even know what CRT is. As a non-American, U.S. politics is confusing. Well, you got to watch the beginning. We defined it. Can you briefly explain CRT? According to who? According to Aaron or someone else? I can tell you what he said right here. I don't have to say it for him.
For any time, also gets denied whiteness, and this is during a period where like
so it has to do with systemic racism, where you have oppressors and the oppressed. You have he although he wasn't he didn't mention power as much as some other CRTers, but that you can look at certain systemic, how society has governed itself, and say that this is the reason why certain people behave the way they behave. Get Destiny or Vosh in here. That'd be fun time. But usually the buzzwords involve power, oppression, intersectionality, disadvantage, privilege. Another good question I think I asked was, where does privilege come from? And he gave a long answer. Like, why can't people just choose their privilege? Like, just take it. Take the privilege for yourself. Why not? Why can't we do that? Because it's earned. Ooh. Takes time. Can be earned in a bad way too. Actually, you know what? I don't think he did. I don't think we actually defined racism, but we kind of did indirectly. He said luck equals privilege? How much longer are you on? I'm driving home. Would love to hop on in 20 minutes. Oh, that's 20 minutes? Depends if someone else hops on and we start talking. I think some privilege is earned, some isn't. Earned as in fought for against those with privilege. This is more of fascist framing. I'd hop on, but I'm at work. I think I can summarize CRT. Let's see if I can find it. I've said this for years. Yeah, this is it. This is CRT summarized. You guys ready? This is all you need to know. Oh, they're going to hate me. Yeah, I've used this clip before. I don't know if I used it for CRT though. But if you want CRT in 4 words, show me the money. I love the fact that so many people are mad at me right now. Gives me hope, meaning, and purpose. Do you love black people? Yeah, well, some of my best friends are black people. I honestly don't get the joke. Well, that's because you're a granola crunching tree hugger, Dargendorp. That's why you were pre-programmed with no sense of humor. You only see kittens and rainbows. We didn't even talk about CRT panic, did we? Not really. Oh, I wanted to talk about James Lindsay more. Man. What's wrong with granola? Nothing's wrong with granola. I'm just saying I could guess his haircut. That's all. Identity politics, yeah. You can use statistics to profile hairstyles with certain groups. And if you came late, I asked him about that profiling. We talked about profiling. Is it wrong to profile based on hubcaps on cars? You never want to profile people, but the cars they drive, maybe. I'm tempted to call in. Oh, feel free. I'll be nice. I'm just having fun. Just having fun. Someone's disappointed with a stranger on the internet. Oh, Well, since I already played that clip, I got to play something for Dargendorp. Because Dargendorp is disappointed with me. This is for you, Dargendorp.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. And who can say if your love grows as your heart shows? Only time. We
Okay, enough of that. Enough of that. I gotta stop making money for Enya TV. It is a great song. It's the theme song for liberals. Copyright strike. Oh, that's foregone conclusion. What do you think is worse? Arrest an innocent or let a guilty person go free? Which is worse? Yeah, this is a good question. And I'm not going to be like Aaron and say it depends. I'm going to answer the question, but let me think about it. Let me think. I'm going to say arrest the innocent. That's the final answer. Oh, we got a caller. Uh-oh. This could be trouble. Is this trouble? Yes, it is trouble.
With a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're driving.
Okay.
Be careful.
I am. So that's why, like, I want to talk more because I've been hoping to hop into the political channel, but I've missed a bunch of your streams.
Yeah.
I pop in the religious, no problem, but this political channel is too hard for me.
Why is it hard for you?
I don't know why. It's both. You make me upset, but in a funny way.
Well, that's the...
Like I laugh. I'm like, I don't agree, but it makes me laugh. And then also, you normally do Mondays for this channel. Is that what it is?
No.
I don't understand what this.
Normally it's Tuesdays, but today I did Monday.
See this is what's. I can't figure out what you're doing on this channel. I'm like, when is he on? When does it happen?
Well, that's why you have to subscribe and get the notification bell and all that. You need to sit.
Yeah.
You need to stay home, quit your job, and just wait for my call.
Yes, sir.
Can you be my girlfriend, Jack? Keep your hands on the wheel.
Do I get a check? Do I get anything for this, or I
said be my
gotta be there
girlfriend,
for
not
you?
my hooker. Come on.
Yeah.
My goodness.
That's funny. I feel like in the modern dating scene, they're pretty similar now. The requirements from one to the other. It gets pretty ridiculous. I actually have a friend of mine who's been dating, and it's very surprising how many girls do expect him to pay on the first date.
Oh, that's wrong. We live in the age of equality.
I'm just interested in who expects and who doesn't expect, because my friend's also a guy that would never let anybody else pay, even if we will go to lunch, he always pays.
My first date with my now wife, we went to a restaurant in the mall, and I had a 2-for-1 deal. So I paid for myself, and she got hers free.
Yeah.
And I let her know. I said, look, I really don't know you. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on a stranger. Let's get to know each other. So here I got my 2-for-1 deal. Don't judge me on this. This is wise, right?
And you guys have had a coupon-style relationship ever since.
Well, you're funny you should say that, because she did give me for Christmas one time coitus on demand, like a coupon.
Coupon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On demand.
That's very fun.
So I took her up on it in church. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, let's go in this usher closet real quick, babe.
Yeah, right behind the pulpit.
Yeah, right behind the pulpit. Depending on the church you're in, some of those pulpits are pretty big. You probably could get some good protection, good coverage back there.
You said you disagreed with something? I said?
Just some of the stuff I've listened to. What I wanted to ask you about is why does this channel even exist? What made you say this can't be a part of the Pine Creek Christian side,
Oh,
and you had to split off?
because I had too many whiners and complainers, and plus I thought it would be nice from a creator content point of view to keep themes more in a certain place, so more of a political theme in
Okay.
a certain place. But yeah, mostly because
So I would
of
say
whiners and
your
complainers.
other channel, right? Your other channel's goal is not necessarily straight deconversion,
Right.
but you're poking holes in Christianity. What's the point of this channel? What are we poking holes in?
Oh, people who like to cry a lot. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it's just to
Be mean.
mean in a loving way. Like it's I would say I do trigger a lot of Christians, and in this channel, I trigger a lot of people who would self-identify as liberal. But mature liberals, they don't. They're I can't trigger them. Like people who know who they are. It's just the young kids who get upset, and it's kind of fun.
Here I am.
Well, you're not that young
No,
anymore.
no, that's not. Anyway, um, so what you define yourself as a conservative, correct?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Means I hate people. I want to see them in jail. I torture children. What else does it mean?
That's not true.
I like to bite the heads off chickens. No, it means
That might be true.
no. It just means that I lean more towards that I can change myself more than I can change you. That personal responsibility is more preferential than spouting I have rights. What else? And then on very specific issues, like I'm for closed borders, I'm for smaller government rather than big government, but nowadays it doesn't seem like it makes a difference. What else? I am.
Oh, so can I just comment on that right there?
Yeah.
Because the two things I heard policy-wise, right, back to back, you said closed borders,
Yeah.
and then small government instead of big government. How is closed borders not big government?
Because it doesn't make the government bigger.
Doesn't make. Oh, you mean literally like how many people are working for the government? You want less people to be working for them, not like how big their control is.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, and like I'm a conservative who thinks that even the military budget's a little too big, like, and that the role of government is a little stretched too much. But I do agree in some welfare programs and social programs. But I would say I'm conservative because, like, I lean against even public schools. Now, I'm not saying I would vote for no public schools. I'm not saying that.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It gives you my mindset that if parents were doing their job and planning for their children, you really wouldn't need public schools.
True. So what do we do? We both know parents aren't planning for their
Right.
kids,
That's why I wouldn't vote
right?
for no
So if
public
it's not public schools,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but I'm saying like the ideal case, like if people were planning and for the future and could afford their own kids, you really wouldn't need public schools.
I mean, this is my, and I'm gonna dig at you because you know that's what I do.
Mhm.
But it's because it's same, just like you, out of love.
Yeah.
This is like the same thing I talk about with my dad. My dad's a conservative, and I always say you're wishful thinking. You're a bleeding heart conservative. You're over here. If people would take care.
Hang on, I'm not wishful thinking because
No, good.
I said I wouldn't vote for abolishing public schools because I know that's wishful
Wait.
thinking.
The reason that you lean conservative is because you wish that people would just kind of take care of themselves, because that's what you would do.
Well, isn't that the
Right?
point of education? Is to get people independent?
The point of education, yeah, definitely is to get people independent.
Right.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just got home, so I'm going to have to go check on my dog and see how much crap I'm going to have to clean up here. But yeah, my this is one thing, and I'll put my cards on the table too in a second, because obviously I'm not as conservative as you, or I wouldn't have called in. But my my viewpoint is that conservatism has this idea of like, if people would just dot dot dot,
Yeah.
then this would be fine. And I mean, yeah, I agree with that. If people would just be nice to each other, how did you get out?
I posted bail.
How did she do? My dog is a genius. She just figured a way. I'm so sorry. This
Your
is
dog's
nothing to
smarter
do with
than you.
anything. She is. She really is smarter than me. Here, we'll go outside. We'll go outside. You're okay. You're okay. There you go.
Okay, what's your question?
Yeah. Well, this is my thought. My thought is, if you're conservative,
Yeah.
the reason you lean conservative is because, like you said, it's easier to change yourself than to put in some government program or have other people pay for what's going on. And I mean, yeah, I agree with that, but I don't think that that's the reality that we live in. So how does it work?
Well, yeah, you're right. Currently, that's not the reality that we live in. But I think my answer is no different than someone who's leaning left, that you can influence people to change their minds slowly over time to create a world where, and I think it's happening already, where teenage pregnancies are going down over time, violent crimes going down over time. So I think you just state your opinions and why you think it, and then if it influences people, great. If not, like, I think the reason why a lot of liberals are liberals is because they have this deep empathy, deep compassion, which is all good, but what it can end up happening is it leads to this feel sorry forism, and which actually can do more harm than good. Boy, that dog is so happy to see you.
She's like this all the time. Hi, we're okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I never thought I was going to be a dog person, and then we got a dog, and I was like, okay, she's fun.
How old is she?
6 months.
Okay. Careful,
So-
she might pee on you.
Oh, it's happened many times. She might pee on me, or she might, distract me, and then I end up hitting my important parts. So you never know what's going to happen with her. So, but this is what I think when you say conservatism, this is what I hear, and I think this is what a lot of people hear, which is this idea that if there's a problem, that the best solution to it is kind of for the government not to do anything and for people just to figure it out.
No.
Is that
No.
okay?
It's what I'm talking about is sort of like the mindset of someone who leans right versus the mindset who leans left, and it can be summarized as tough love versus soft love.
Sure.
Yeah, and we need both in society to run.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so what
And that's why. Go ahead.
yeah, and so I have no problem as a conservative saying that some welfare programs are needed, and I hope that,
Which ones?
well, like food stamps, like people going hungry is not good,
Okay.
right?
But if somebody said, "Oh, I think we need food stamps because it makes me sad that people go hungry," you would say liberal. And if someone said we need food stamps because I think it's not good that people go hungry, would you say, "Oh, like how would you tell the difference on food stamps?"
I
for
think you'd be
example?
hard pressed to find any conservative that says that there are 4 people starving to death. I mean, no.
Well, they don't say that out loud.
Oh, come on. You have this evil look on conservatives, and some liberals do. Like they just think that we're evil. Like they'll throw out words like fascist and Hitler, and it's like,
I don't, but in my perspective, I only, I spend more time with people who are in their mid-20s and younger. And conservatives that I know are absolutely less empathetic
yes,
than liberals.
on average.
And especially in people, I know multi-generational conservative households, and it seems like their kids are always very like, for example, I guess if I'm imagining a situation, this is hypothetical, this is not real, where 2 people pass a homeless person, one person gives the homeless person time, attention, money, anything,
Yeah.
and the other person completely ignores them. If I had to guess, like which is a conservative and which is a liberal, I would say I bet you the conservative just walks straight past.
I don't know
But
about that.
that's not. I wouldn't say that that's a fair
know what I do?
estimate, though.
Right. This is my. I'm saying what my knee jerk is.
Yeah, I know.
No, what do you do? Go ahead.
This is what I do when I see a homeless person. I go up to them.
Yeah.
I've done this many times. I go up to them and I say, "Hey, do you know any jokes?" And they say, "Yeah."
Yeah.
They usually say yes, and I say, "I'll give you $1 for a joke." And they tell me a joke. I laugh. I give them $1. That
That's
is
fun.
way better than just giving $1.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, but that's a conservative principle of earning your money rather than just giving it. Oh, I'm triggering more. I'm
Interesting.
triggering more liberals right now. How dare you say
Okay.
earn?
See, I don't know. See, like even that's an interesting idea to me. Are liberals anti-earning things, you think?
No, not. I would say, in general, not. But I think there's this maybe just a frame of mind that you shouldn't expect that, or that people deserve things for just being human. Now, this is a huge difference, right? It's just
Yeah.
the mere fact that you exist means you should get housing, food, healthcare.
Okay, so like there's a conservative idea, right? And I think that you've said that you're not even. I've heard you say multiple things on this, so I don't know where you are. But abortion,
Yeah.
right? There's a conservative idea that just being conceived means you have a right to be born without doing anything.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
And I would say that, but I would say, would you think that that's a conservative position, or do you think that's liberal?
Yeah, I would say that's well, in the United States, that it would be more of a liberal thing because conservatives tend to lean on the ontology of existence, so that something's valuable just for merely existing because they're created in the image of God, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that way,
Yeah,
I would say
don't-
I'm more liberal thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
See, I think that the part of this that triggers me, I guess. No, it doesn't trigger me. It doesn't trigger me. But that when I listen to you and I go, oh, that grinds my gears a little bit, is because there's a lot of funny bits that you do that are at the expense of a liberal stereotype.
yeah,
And some of them are pretty funny. You say something and it does make me laugh. But then
Good.
I think that your expectation of a conservative stereotype, you will always push back on. Like even with my little example of two people giving the homeless, just something that was a
Yeah.
stereotype that I was trying to think of. You were like, well, I'm a conservative and this is what I do.
yeah.
And I think that's where for me, that this channel is harder for me.
Okay.
This channel, I want to watch it more, but I think
You want me
for
to beat up on
example,
conservatives more?
well, I think you're far more even-handed when it comes to religion. I think you're far more willing to. I mean, even if it's just a joke like, "Hey, Satan, can you turn me up?" Or silly
I
stuff
said
like
some-
that. That's like,
Yeah, I said something when you first came on, like, what's a conservative? I said it's somebody who eats the heads off chickens and stuff. Like it's sort of
Yeah.
like what I did there, like similar.
yeah, you recognize the stereotype, but I don't think that you would ever genuinely adhere to it. But I think that we, like, for example, the stereotype of an angry liberal atheist. I think you would be like, yeah, that's 100% real. And I mean, so would I. I
Yeah,
know lots of
especially on
angry.
YouTube.
Yes, it is prevalent. But then when it comes to the idea of like a conservative person who might say like, I don't care about starving kids. What would you say about that type of a stereotype?
I would say, please send me that type of person. I want to meet them and talk to them.
Interesting. Because I don't think they say it out loud, but I think that if you look at examples of sweeping policies of the last, I don't know, 70, 80 years, that while there are definitely markers that have gotten better and better and better in this country, that there are other markers that have gotten worse and worse and worse into the last 15, 20 years. And I think that the only reason that they're getting better now is because of more eyeballs being on them. Liberals are crying about it, and that makes policies have to change.
There's more eyeballs on liberals?
On just policies in general, like, I mean, one of the examples I like to use is with the Trump and the kids in cages.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like this was new. Trump didn't sit down,
Yeah.
in office and go, all right, okay, first thing I want to do, I want kids in cages. Like that, that's not what happened.
Right.
But that's how a lot of liberals perceived it to have happened.
And there was more kids in cages under Obama than Trump.
Right. But I think that the the thing is that it's like this blame game. And this is where I would say I am. I'm not liberal and I'm not conservative. I don't like either side. I'm people first, and I'm willing to vote. Can you calm down?
Yeah.
I'm willing to vote
I'm
for
people first.
anybody.
Shut up, dog.
Yeah. I'm both. Look, I have a small dog and I beat her, so you know what I mean. Like I go both ways.
Yeah.
Whatever works for people. That's what I'm about. So like that idea of, okay, well, there was more under Obama than Trump. That's not good. I agree. How do we get zero? That's the goal that I would want.
Well, they were in nice cages.
It's not.
Like people got this idea that there was no food, no water. No, like just as good as what you have for your dog.
But doesn't it depend on where you are? You know, I think this is another thing too. Like, what do we accept as this is okay to do to another human being? And I think there's a huge branching of what people think about it. And it's kind of like when we talk about with religion. Like there was tons of different Christians who believe tons of different things. There's a huge spectrum of Christianity. But when it comes to politics, it's like there's liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat.
Yeah.
If you don't
that's
view people as one or the other, you're a monster.
Yeah. And the thing is, I do think there is like there's a dichotomy in thought, but the whole idea that there's only two political parties, like competitive ones in the United States, is just laughable to me.
Really?
Yeah. Like there should be way more.
Why isn't there, you think?
I don't know. That's a good question.
You know, I would say that there's so much financial incentive for the two primary parties to stay exactly how they are that they do.
Yeah, but you would think that there'd be enough money to go around to start new parties.
Okay, well, I mean, if we use that kind of example, it's like, where's the other Amazon? You know, Amazon
well,
came
Walmart's
along.
Starting, but
that's true. But Walmart's a giant. Right? We're talking about the political parties, I guess. Unless you're saying you think the Whig Party might come.
You got to go back to where you were.
You know, like
your signal's going.
Oh, is it worse?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
sorry,
my guess is,
am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. But go back, sit down to where you belong. But there's tons of Republicans who are not happy, and they would probably like want a libertarian party. And there's tons of Democrats that are not happy, and they would probably want a full-out socialist party. Why the United States has this two-party system?
But think about like, remember in 2016 when we had all those the Never Trump guys? They were Republican, and they were going to die on that hill, Never Trump. What happened to them? Right? They all folded. They're all.
Trump had them killed.
Yeah, I mean, politically.
Yeah.
He did.
Well, I don't know.
They're gone. Or, you know, I just think there's a lot, or like if you were a liberal and you were a Bernie supporter, what happened to those guys?
They're still out there.
Most
of them
hiding
are
in the bushes
chat right now.
in the wind. Yeah. All these Bernie bros who are like, no, I'm a huge Bernie. But I mean, like, I'm just using 2016 as an example because I spent a lot of, you know, I'm a young man. I had more focus on that election than any other election. But like the ideas of that we had there with the political people that we were looking at were quite broad. The spectrum was pretty broad, and yet when it came down to it was Clinton and Trump. And Trump, I think, you'd probably agree with this too. He represented this idea of a different Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Right? This is not the Republican Party of your grandfather. This is a new Republican Party. And Hillary represented same old in politics. And Trump won.
Yep.
Right? But what did we get for that? Business as usual, right? Is there anything that's different?
Not really.
So I don't know. Whenever I hear any conservative versus liberal, or this is what I always struggle with is like, even with somebody like Donald Trump, who I think is as different a politician as you can imagine, out of any other president who's been a Donald Trump, as far as presentation and vocalization and this fervent support he gets. And yet,
hang on, but
it was business as usual. He was just another president.
You said, you know, what did Trump give us? One could say that he gave us the lowest African American unemployment ever in the history of the United States. Now that
True.
will trigger the libs,
Right. Well, was that because of him, or is that?
Well, yeah, that's the question, right?
I mean, if we're saying that, oh, it was on the rise, and then Trump came in and made this change, I guess I would say that's impressive. But isn't that just like the course of the history of this country?
Well, you could say he you could say he
it's
gave
like saying that
directly was the lowest corporate tax rate in decades.
Okay, so that's great for major corporations.
Yep. And it's great
And
for
I think
people too.
you would say then that's good for the American people.
Yep. You know why?
Okay, go ahead.
Because some of those corporations might have headquartered in a different country if Trump wouldn't have done that. In fact,
That's true.
Canada was at a lower corporate tax rate before Trump came in than United States. And some companies might have threatened to move to Canada, which they could have very easily done, taken a lot of jobs with them.
But wouldn't that just show like the economy would move and change?
Yeah.
And that would end up being good for America too, though, right? I mean, we play in a global economy.
Yeah, but I am still for closed borders, even though trade, is very important. It's because of the best way to test economic systems is to have a closed system, like a control. And it's becoming really difficult to test economic systems when there's, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's just difficult to test economic systems when you have so many variables. So that's one reason to have closed borders. Another reason to have closed borders is just the fairness. Like, I'm a liberal in this sense. I'm for fairness. And it's unfair for me to spend 10 years to get my green card and some people just get in. Like, for me to actually just get in, I had to jump through so many hoops.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, using the borders since I was talking about I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole. We go from one thing to another. No, I'm kidding. That's a you quote. With the border, like if we go back to the 60s and 70s when the border was way more open, there was a ton of people who would come in, but we'd also see that same amount of people leave, right? Because they would come in for work.
Yeah.
And now that we've tightened the border, when people come in, they can't come in and leave. It's harder to get in and out. And now we've got more families.
Well, it's still easy to get out.
Come here with their whole family.
It's incredibly easy to get out of the United States. As an immigrant?
I would say that if your financial, your job is you come work in the U.S. and you leave, getting in it gets harder and harder, right?
Yeah, getting in is hard. Getting out is easy.
This system becomes less economic, I guess.
Have you been to the Mexican border?
I hear what you're saying. You can leave anytime you want. You can't get back in, is what you're saying. That's true.
There's many times at the Mexican border, there's not even a guy there. You just drive across. Well, I should
walk by. I don't know.
It's a little tougher now, but there was many years where you could just drive. I mean, you didn't even have to stop.
Either way.
But anyhow,
for many years it was both ways. You could go back and forth, right?
Yeah, I got a liberal who wants in. Besides you.
Oh, somebody's actually liberal, not
a pretender like you are.
Not me, where I'm a soft. Yeah.
You don't speak for the liberal voice. You know that.
That's true. I make liberals upset probably as often as you do.
Yeah. So instead of a poser.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to bore you.
I'm going to let a real liberal.
I'll let you go to the.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to do a closing line before you cut me, or?
Yeah, sure.
Since that's the style that we do,
Tell me.
I don't know. I thought
Tell me your favorite joke.
I thought you were going to cut me right there.
Tell me your favorite joke.
Oh, the one I did last night.
Okay.
Hey, Doug, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I don't have a camera, but I came to represent the liberal side, and I found your first guest pretty interesting.
Oh, the Aaron guy, the main show.
Yeah. It was a good conversation, but I want to point out 3 key things that I really dislike that he did as a liberal.
Okay, I got my pen. Number 1.
Let's do it. Number 1, he kept calling you buddy, which seemed like a reference to destiny. It was just kind of condescending, and he just kept throwing that out there. And I was like, why are you going and using that? Like, did you hear him call you buddy a few times?
Actually, now that you say it, yeah, I do remember that. But at the time, it didn't click.
Number two, he often accused you of kind of being in bad faith, mishearing him when you said witches, and he was like, "Oh, come on." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 chill out. This is a nice conversation. There's no need to." He was very jumpy, and you never took the bait. You never were aggressive towards him in return, but multiple times he said, "Oh, you're going mask off," and I was like, "Oh, come on. Let's
Yeah,
just
I remember that
let's just."
one.
Yeah, that caught me too. And number three, he kept saying, "I want to teach you.
I want to
I want
teach you.
to help you understand." And it didn't come off very
Yeah.
it didn't work. And I hate it because I'm liberal. And if you want, I'd love for you to ask me any questions about the liberal side to anything of this.
You know what? That's a great idea. And I want to say that for a guy like Aaron, he might say, "Well, so what? These are just little things like Buddy, like Doug can take it," and he's right. And the mask off comments and so forth. Yeah, it didn't really bother me, but I did notice it. And then the condescension of "I want to teach you." I'm not the type of person you can condescend upon because I kind of older and know who I am, and I'm free. I'm the type of guy who will freely admit I don't know something, and which I think I did during that. But if there's like someone listening who might be not just on this issue, but any issue, not really conservative, not really liberal, just hey, let's hear these two people out. Rhetorically, I think what the three things you mentioned is really bad for him.
Yeah. And I think you asked, because you asked about redlining. I think he got a little bit into the crack cocaine disparity in drug sentencing, where, you have two drugs, which are basically the same, but one is more predominant in another community, yet there's harsher sentences towards another. And I think I would agree with you. So we have some agreement that America has been going on a getting better track on our racist issues, and we still
Yeah.
have a lot. So I'm more than happy to admit I think he wouldn't want to give you certain things. So wherever you want to take this conversation for the moment, it is your show, your call.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question about China versus United States so much, to just try to get him to admit that because the United States is a diverse country, China is a very monolithic country, that you're going to have way more racism, I mean, against people who don't look like you in China than in the United States, because you're just around people who look differently than you way more than in China. And
Yeah, and I think racism is very different depending on where you're at, especially in the United States. You go to a very diverse area around colleges where there's a lot of minority groups. You're going to see a lot more accepting and open communities. And I'm not saying if you go to other spots, it's just different. And then there's different forms of racism. Racism is not an easy topic.
you know what's interesting is I don't know you. Have I ever talked to you
Mhm.
before?
No, I'm
Yeah.
around a lot though.
There's nothing in, and I'm being very honest with you, there's nothing inside me right now who wants to convert you to my way of thinking. I'm being
What
honest.
if I said I want to tax you more, Doug? Do you want to change that
I
right
would
now?
support your right and opinion on this. Like, uh, that's fine. We can disagree on taxation levels. Like, even a conservative who thinks that the tax rates are actually pretty good right now. I wouldn't say lower them. And a lot of conservatives might hear me say that and say, no, they're way too high, blah, blah, blah. But I honestly think society needs people who lean far further left and people who lean further right. And now, tell me if you disagree with this. I think more conservatives can say what I just said, that we need people like you. What's your first name, by the way?
It's Adam.
Adam. My guess is there's more conservatives who would say we need people like you, Adam, than liberals who would say we need people like you, Doug. Am I wrong?
I think, sadly, my side has been more of the shutting down debate side and more of the demonizing the other side. There's some really bad things that conservatives have been promoting lately, especially with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. But I think we need to talk to each other to change each other's minds on these things. And I'm sad to say my side, to critique my side, is the side saying, don't talk to them. They're wrong. They're evil. And you're not going to change anyone's mind by polarizing each other like that.
Amen. Yeah, I agree with you. But the thing is, I have quite a few liberal friends, or people who lean left at least. And they're not that way. Like they can say, I can appreciate different points of view and maybe certain policies and circumstances we need more of a right wing solution versus the left wing. In other words, sometimes tough love is needed before the soft love approach or whatever. I don't know. Maybe.
What if I were to present to you, because I feel like he failed. Sorry, the gentleman was on first. I feel like he failed in showing how there is still racism in some of the laws. I feel like I could present you one way we could fix America for the better.
Okay, excellent. And who knows, I
Okay.
might agree with your policy suggestion. What do you have?
Well, we live in a digital age, so it's pretty easy for people to make a database. Let's go with like SQL, excuse me, or Access, some sort of database, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So we take everything at the DMV, we store it in this digital database. All someone needs is access to the internet. Now that could get spotty. We need to make sure we have good infrastructure. But all we have to do at voting places is have somebody with a computer who has access to the digital database. And when you come in to vote, they take your picture, they log it as you voted, they match it to the picture. But let's say you're not in the digital database. Well, guess what? They take your picture there. Now, we no longer need to register people to vote. We just say, wherever you get your mail, you vote. Because why do people need to register before a certain date? Why don't we just say, if you live here, you vote here? That's the way it works. So this way, there's no cost to voting. All you do is go to your nearest polling district, and we allow anyone to vote at any polling district. That way, there's not overcrowding. And I think this is the best way to not disenfranchise people who have less access to get IDs or less access to get to polling places which are further away. Your thoughts on that?
I agree.
Yeah, simple. Why don't politicians just do that?
It is. It's simple in a way, but it would require a ton of cameras at a ton of places.
Yeah, and I'm willing for my taxes to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I say let's do it. I think it's more secure, and then we could use neural nets and photo matching to see if there's some sort of people who are voting multiple times in multiple areas.
Okay, so cameras at voting stations. We're gonna submit that to the Senate and see what they say. Okay, what's next? See, you
They'll
and
get
I
it-
should
they'll
run the
get you in-
country. You know that?
Well, I feel like we have a lot in common. I feel like you're just the more conservative version of me. And but throw me a question or two before I let you go. And thank you for having me on with no camera, taking a risk on me.
Well, we talked about closed and open borders quite a bit.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on it? Because I lean more towards pretty strict entrance requirements. In other words, if someone crosses illegally, they're illegals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got an easy way of dealing with this one too. But first off, I'm going to say I'm actually first generation American on my dad's side. He comes from a land up north. His father came from Germany.
Oh,
You
okay.
probably know where he comes from.
I thought you were going to say Canada.
Yeah, no. He comes from Canada, but he came over during. My grandfather came over during World War II due to some guy who I'm not going to get demonetized by saying his name. But with that in mind, the number one way to deal with this problem with immigration is to go after the companies. That's simply it. We do not demonize people coming here to make a better lives for themselves. We just say, if you are employing people illegally, we are going to tax and tax is probably not the word, fine. There we go, fine your company out of existence. So now, sadly, this will mean that people trying to make a better life by crossing over the border, because that's what most people are doing, are not going to be able to get employed. But we hopefully can increase our legal immigration, but we don't go after the people who are just trying to provide for their families. Once again, just go after the companies. That's my pure stance on this. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good idea. However, what would your stance be on social services for those people who come in and then don't find jobs and don't leave?
It's a good question. I'm a little too altruistic for you, probably. I'm gonna
Because that would be a huge burden on society. Yes. If they
It is a burden.
If they don't work, how are they going to live?
Maybe we could set up something with tariffs where when we figure out the percent coming in, we put tariffs on items from other countries that are doing this, and we try to make up the funds that way. That's my best idea. I'm not going to limit the access to help people.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Well, thank you. That's off the. I don't know. We gotta talk about these things.
No,
You know?
I like that.
Hey,
Okay, so
I'm on the
we'll
trending.
submit that
Go ahead.
to the Senate. So basically, find
I mean,
companies.
they'll get to this after they look through AOC and Hunter Biden's laptop. They'll get to this.
So we find companies that hire immigrants illegally, and then for those who come in and are not working and they need food stamps or whatever, we bill the country they
Yeah, with
came
tariff.
from through tariffs.
Yeah.
Excellent. And we got to have a little cut there too, like 7% for administrative on top of what it.
Gosh, I tell you, the number one thing is, I tell you, if the United States ran like a business,
Mhm.
we would see major differences. We'd see a lot of there's so much waste in government. One thing you didn't ask me about was food stamps. I wish you did, because I think we should increase what we're giving to food stamps, but we should limit what people get. You should get rice, you should get milk, you should get bread, and then also, this is the last thing I'll say. There's a thing called, have you ever heard of food deserts?
No, what's that?
Food. Thank you for asking. Yeah, food deserts are areas of where people live, where maybe the nearest grocery store to them is, let's say, 20 miles away. So you live in a food desert, like, there's no access to good grocery stores. So maybe the best place for you to use your EBT is like a gas station, and the gas station probably doesn't have the variety of food you might need to feed a family. So I hate to say this, but you might disagree. I almost think we need government grocery stores.
Hmm.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm against government grocery stores because I don't know if they know how to stock things.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. The government's really bad at stuff. I worked a government job a long time ago, and the number one thing was you have to spend all the government money or they'll give you less money. And it was digging holes in the dirt, which I will say gives you a lot of character if you dig holes for 2 years.
I do like your idea though of increasing food stamps, but making it like so you can't buy chocolate bars with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the food stamps, I sadly, I know a little bit about it. There's a big problem right now with people selling their food stamps, if you didn't know about that. So we need to highly look into that. It's really tough. A lot of these issues are multifaceted, and you're just trying to plug holes in the dam to help people,
What about CRT? Should it be taught in kindergarten?
Yeah, I think it just depends how we teach it. That's a big thing.
Okay.
You can ask further detail if you'd like.
Yeah. How would you teach it in kindergarten?
Well, I think, once again, if you look at some states which are banning like the talk about slavery, which you and I obviously agree existed and has been a horrible part of our American history. Welcome to America, Doug. I hope you get to vote soon. With that, I think when we present history, we try to let people understand that my parents, who were born in the 50s, experienced, seeing colored water fountains. The problems that we have with racism in this country have gotten better, like you said. So we teach it to them like this. We say things are getting better, but my big problem, why I think racism is still a big problem, is because it's not like when slaves were freed, everything was equal. It's not like when African Americans got to vote, everything was equal. It's not like when we desegregated, everything was equal. There's still the years of buildup that, I'll say this, if you come from a family that has been to college, multiple parents, grandparents, gone to Ivy League schools, they're going to tell you go to college. And getting education is probably the number one way to better yourself and to have more income later in life, especially with a STEM degree, I'm sure you'd say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you end up not doing those things, it doesn't mean your life is going to turn out poorly. But the one thing I do agree with Aaron on is there's a little bit of luck, who you're born to, what access you have to resources, and the racism of the past puts a lot of people in an unlucky scenario in America. So I think we try to find age appropriate ways to talk about America
Yeah.
had a bad history.
What's interesting?
some ways.
What's interesting about this conversation is it seems like if I was a Hispanic or an Asian person or any other person of color, or a Native American, it seems like, why are you guys always talking about African Americans and slavery? Like, what about us?
Oh, Native Americans bad.
Yeah.
I would have happily said that. That's way worse. I mean, we killed them off basically. We took land from so many people. I mean, there's a video of like one of the guys crying as we took like North Dakota or something. There's a video of the guy like crying as we take all their land for like $50. a lot
Yeah,
of money
like
back then.
in Canada, it's really bad, and it's still like the situation there with
The school, right?
well, no, I'm just talking about in reservations and so forth. Like the suicide rates are incredible, probably way higher than trans people, and the just the feeling of no purpose in life is
Yeah.
still a huge problem. And the thing is, they get everything paid for from the Canadian government, if as long as you're on the reservation. And it seems like money doesn't solve that problem of purpose.
Yeah. Well, I know money it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think you've talked about on your I really liked your review of Destiny's stuff because he got some stuff right, but he was talking about how like he said something about money that just didn't make sense, or I don't know. But to the point about Canada and Indigenous people, um, they have to be part of the conversation, is what I'd say. The way we fix problems that we have is to bring these people into the conversation and to work with them. So probably I wouldn't be the best person to speak about all the racism and how we fix these issues. The best thing I can do is listen to people and acknowledge that problems existed, and we still see the echoing of those problems today.
Again, to Aaron's credit, he said that he's not for pitting one race over another.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you agree with that too. But I
100%.
do think there's a lot of followers or proponents, whatever you want to call it, who do that, who want at a very early age for young white kids to feel bad for simply being a white kid. And do you agree with me that that has to stop?
Yes. I know you like direct answers, but I think the language sometimes gets people agitated when people say things like, you should acknowledge your privilege. Um, I think we could do better at saying it. Like, let's say I said something to you like, Doug, do you think uh, you had advantages growing up in life?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's what we mean by acknowledge privileges. I think it makes people feel like maybe they didn't work towards these things. And I think one problem Aaron kept having is he kept talking about this luck thing, which I think exists, but he didn't give any agency to the person to say that they can overcome circumstances. I kept getting this feeling from him that we're all robots and you're going to be born to this family in this society and you're going to have a lot of your actions dictated by that. Now, it is true that a lot of your circumstances are pre-decided before you, but you have to give agency to the person. You have to say, Doug had advantages, but Doug's done a lot of great things with his advantages. It's like the Bible, the story of the talents. You don't bury them in the yard. I'm not religious.
But you know that parable.
Oh, I know the Bible really well. Let's just say went to a Baptist school growing up. So
and I think that's the problem or the fear. If there is a panic, that's what it is from some people in the United States, is that whole pitting against each other, like to create. We've come such a long distance since the civil rights movement to now, and that we actually might go backwards if some versions of CRT is implemented in a way of like, you're the problem.
yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, is that we're not trying to say. I think bad ways of doing CRT would be to say, to children, you're the one, like you mentioned that how some children might be taught you're the oppressor. Um, but wouldn't it be true that, would you agree with this statement? A lot of oppression in the past came from white males.
Yes.
A lot of power in society today is held by white males.
Yes.
Oppression comes from people in society who are in power.
Yes.
White males have the greatest ability to oppress people with their power.
Historically, yes. I think that's
Okay, and
changing today.
maybe currently. Yeah, and there's a lot of change. There's a lot of change with CEOs.
But now let me ask you some
Go ahead.
questions.
Go ahead.
Is power inherently bad?
No.
Can have white males use their power to help people?
Yes,
Are some of these people minorities?
definitely.
Right. So it goes both ways, but I can hear the liberals screaming right now, but it's more one-sided, Doug. How dare you bring up about the good stuff?
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. I hope to, like you said, you've got liberal friends, and maybe I'll just come on next time as your liberal friend. So
Do you play poker?
I play a lot of poker. I played Omaha High Low.
Because we play poker every Wednesday and Sunday.
You don't want me to take your money, Doug?
Oh, them are fighting words.
What's the pot limit?
Oh, it's a small home game that's online.
What's the buy-in?
Buy-in for the tournaments is $20,
Okay.
and the buy-in
What's
for
the
cash
what's
game
the big and small ante?
for the tournament. Well, it goes up because it's a tournament, but
Okay, yeah. So it starts
but
out
we
like
also play a cash game
20.
after the tournament that is anywhere from a $28 to $50 buy-in. No rake, of course.
Oh, yeah,
All
of course.
above board. And it's just fun. We hang out. We sometimes talk about politics, but sometimes religion, but mostly it's a community where we've got to know each other, and actually, I hate to say this, but we actually kind of care for each other.
Cool. I'll say one last thing before I head off is I actually supported myself for a year back in '06 playing poker. I think it was '06. I don't know. The years start to blur together. But one thing is, when I say I supported myself, I mean I paid rent and I fed myself.
Wow.
Well, but rent back then was like $400, and food was, let's just say I was eating boxes of cereal for a little
Well,
while. It wasn't lavish.
in the days of Ultimate Bet and all those sites,
Oh yeah, I played AP.
I put in $30,
Absolutely.
and I decided to cash out at $3,000 after 6 months. And I'm glad I did, because people started getting better. But I just played ABC poker on 10 tables at a time. Just played aces, kings, queens, whatever. And it was easy money. You can't do that anymore, but back then you could.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing. Probably my favorite hand is low suited connectors, but my second favorite hand is 2-7 offsuit.
Oh.
No one sees that coming.
Except for me,
No one-
because I do the exact same thing.
I told you, you're the conservative me, Doug.
Yeah. There's some of my
We're
poker
just
buddies in
gonna-
here right now laughing, because I started that. I mean, in our group, I let them know, hey, one of my favorite hands is 7-2 off. And so I will raise big with 7-2, and I will raise big with aces, and it's up to you to figure out which is which.
What if I told you sometimes to make my decision, I go to a random number generator to keep myself more random? not let
Now
people know
that
what I'm
is
doing?
just dirty pool.
Well, thank you, Doug, and maybe I'll see you on poker sometime.
Okay, email me. Do you know how to get my email? I can put it.
It's like Songbird or something. I
No,
know it's in
not
your-
that one. In fact,
Oh, okay.
I haven't checked that one in a long time. I bet you I got.
You're gonna put it in like the chat
I bet you I
here?
have billions of gifts there. I haven't even checked out. But look,
All the Applebee's gift cards.
yeah. Check the chat here, right?
Okay, I gotta check the chat.
Copy and paste that.
Cool. Got it. Cool. Well, thank you for your time, and your guest did all right. He did okay. It was a good talk.
It was good, yeah. But after talking to you now, I'd much rather have spent the 2 hours with you.
Well, I appreciate.
I actually
that.
think if you and I were representatives of the House for our states, we could get a lot of things done.
I need to move over to. Well, I think you say all the time where you're at. Move over to Wichita, the home office.
Yeah, Kansas. No, I am in Arizona, so I would represent Arizona.
Okay.
What state are you in?
Oh, I'm over in New York.
New York. Okay.
New York. Got that New York. Say some water.
Water.
So.
Okay, nice.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, nice talking to you. Take care.
you.
Don't hate me for making friends with people across the aisle. Oh, I'm gonna. Before I go, I want to get people really upset with me. I want Aaron to be really mad. I found this before we went live, but I didn't play it. But okay, are you guys ready to be really, really, really mad?
Race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other. That's pretty much what it's going. That's pretty much. I don't care what you say. It's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white. You're going to personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, because I only got 5 minutes now.
Because you're lucky.
2 medical degrees. No mom, no dad in the house. Worked my way through college. Sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now is already something I do in my community right now to speak out against stuff, because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't gonna be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't gonna let you get no, oh, you know you're not gonna be able to do it here because you know the white man gonna keep you down. Well, how did I get where I am right now? If some white man
because of luck.
Down? How am I now directing over folks that look just like you guys in this room right now? How? What kept me down? What oppressed me? I work for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You gonna sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? Of this the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? This is what we come to now. I can't believe we even talking about this right now. The last thing I'm gonna say right here is something that's crazy. Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their
character.
Their character, not their skin. If they letting this stuff go on right now, it is absolutely doing the complete reverse of what he's doing. So when February comes, don't talk about Martin Luther King. When February comes, don't talk about Black History Month. If y'all gonna sit there and just pretty much pee on his grave with this nonsense, that's exactly what's about to happen. When it all comes down to it, the person that's gonna be suffering from this, the one's gonna be hurt from this, is the kids. 10 years from now, if this stuff goes on, whose fault is it gonna be? Whose fault is it going to be? Who we going to look back on and blame for this? Because this is stuff we talking about right now. This stuff is going on right now. I do this stuff on a daily basis. I'm in the hood. I'm in the communities. I'm out there with folks in their face. I've been doing this stuff since I was 18 years old, talking to black folks. And you know what? None of them are buying this nonsense. None of them are. But if you want to implement this into the school system, I guarantee you to the day that I die, I'm going to be the very person right there debunking stuff, tearing stuff down, letting them know they can do exactly what I did and get exactly where I am by putting themselves to work and getting there. And ain't not one white person ever going to keep any of them from getting there. So the CRT stuff, BS.
Can I get an amen? He must be from Texas. I would dare Aaron. Aaron, if you're listening, I would dare you to say that he is where he is today because of luck. Even if you believe that's true, look him right in the eyes and say that to him. I dare you. Because of luck. Thanks for coming, Keanu. Love your work in the movies. Oh yeah, and Adam, we got unemployed stand-up comedian poker night, so he'll make you laugh. I had fun. 3.5 hours later. I'm not sure if I'll do a live stream tomorrow since I did one today. Or I might do a religious thing on my main channel tomorrow. Who knows? We'll see.